Hello and welcome to the Data Protection, Disaster Recovery, and Disaster Recovery as a Service Megacast event brought to you by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis, and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's event. Today, we are excited to have experts presenting from Cohesity, Druva, Veeam, Nutanix, DataCore, and Unitrends. We have an awesome show lined up for you today. It's going to be another excellent megacast. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on the event. If this is your first megacast, welcome. Thank you so much for being on. We have a loyal audience of regular followers who join us on the Megacast and EcoCast event. So if it's your first event, you're in for a real pleasure today, I think. You're going to learn a lot. If you have joined us on an event before, thank you for your attendance and loyalty. We do appreciate it. We at Actual Tech Media created the Megacast and EcoCast event series to help educate IT professionals, such as yourselves, about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology, to help you to learn as much as possible, to help you get all your questions answered. You don't have to drive downtown to the convention center or fly halfway across the country to learn about innovative new products and technology. You can do it right here. Trust me, I was an IT manager and a system administrator, network admin for many years. I remember having to ask permission from my boss to drive downtown or take the train downtown to go to the convention center and spend the day away from my job, which I was supposed to be doing, and instead try to learn about some new technology. And there was always this kind of, bashful, sorrowful tone to have to ask to go do some training and some learning and learn about new products. But not so with the Megacast and EcoCast. You can do it from your desk. You can probably do it while, answering some support tickets as well. So thank you for joining today's event. We are going to learn a lot. Before we jump into it, we have a little bit of housekeeping that we first need to cover. We do have some awesome prizes. I mean, after all, this is a megacast, and we have mega prizes. I will talk about those prizes in just a moment and the requirements to be eligible for those prize drawings. Questions. I said we want this to be an educational event, and that is true. So use the questions box to get your questions answered. There are going to be some really complex topics presented today. If you're new to any of these, or if you're confused by any of the terminology or the methods or the architecture, use that questions box to ask all the questions you'd like. We'll have dedicated Q&A sessions with each of the presenters today at the end of their presentation, and I'll be asking the best questions. If there are any questions we don't get to, we'll be forwarding those to the presenters after the event. I also have some questions for you, just like the poll questions we just did, so I appreciate your participation in those. And then social. We want this to be a social event. I'll be tweeting about the event over on Twitter. You can actually tweet about the event directly from your console. If you click on the Twitter icon at the bottom of the page, it will automatically append today's hashtag, which is DP Megacast or Data Protection Megacast, to anything that you tweet. The first time you tweet, it can be a little confusing. It pops up an authorization from Twitter. That's standard Twitter stuff, and your credentials will just be kept between you and Twitter. And then finally, resources. If you click on the Handouts tab right there, there are some hand-selected resources from each of our presenters. And if you download those PDFs, you can read them after the event, share them with your friends and family. And there's also some URL links there as well. So for additional information, make sure you check out the Handouts tab. Whoa, prizes. Wow. You could win one of 5 new Surface Pro 7s. These are the 8 gig of RAM, Core i5, 256 gigs of storage models. We are giving out 5 on today's event. And, oh, by the way, we're also going to give out an Amazon $500 gift card after every presenter on the event. So make sure you stay tuned. Don't go off to lunch. You don't want to miss the Megacast prize giveaways. Now, to be eligible for the prize drawings, you must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. That is a requirement for all prize winners. Full prize terms and conditions can be found if you click on the Handouts tab and scroll down, click on the prize terms and conditions. They're also over on our events website, events.actualtechmedia.com. Now, through the many years we've been doing the Megacast and EcoCast event series, we've had a number of generous attendees who win prizes say, hey, I can't accept this, or hey, I've got too many electronics already. I just want to donate these to someone who needs help, honestly. And so we've selected these charities, and thankfully attendees have selected charities who want to donate their prizes, and we have helped out a lot of people. So if you win a prize and you'd like to do that, we would love to help you do that as well. So thank you in advance. The hashtag for today on Twitter is DP Megacast for Data Protection Megacast. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter. We are at Actual Tech Media. And, oh yeah, you can follow me too, David M. Davis on Twitter as well. We also have a number of other social media that you can subscribe to on YouTube, Facebook, and our 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes Store. If you click on the very top right-hand side of your console, you'll find the YouTube icon, Facebook, and LinkedIn right there. Click on those, and those will take you to our respective pages. Now, before we jump into it with our first presenter on the event today, just a little bit of background and level setting and introduction here that I want to cover. So if you're preparing for disaster in 2020 and beyond, which that's probably the reason that you're on the event today, I wanted to give you a little bit of background information. If you already know all this stuff, sorry, it'll just be about 5 minutes, but I hope that there are some tips for everyone out there at all different levels of expertise, in this presentation. So, I mean, the bad news, and if you're in IT, you probably already know this, the bad news, unfortunately. I mean, like I said, I was in IT too. I went through a year of disaster recovery planning and preparation, trying to improve our plan and select a offsite facility and get bandwidth and replication, all these things in place. Unfortunately, the solutions back then were very not very good. We'll just say that. They weren't good back then. I'm dating myself, but today the solutions are really good. That's the good news. I'm going to get to that in a second. But the bad news is that organizations like yourselves are struggling with compliance, struggling to prepare for disaster recovery, constant complexity, massively growing data. We have dynamic environments, new applications being brought up all the time, applications being brought up in the cloud, and software as a service, SaaS applications, integrations all between them. The data is everywhere. You have data on mobile devices that employees and end users are using, bring your own desktop, and at the same time, someone in finance is probably saying, we got to control costs. We got to get the cost down in IT, and we can't be spending, all this money. And so when we ask for money for disaster recovery and data protection, it can be tough. We really have to justify it. But we also know that the cost of downtime is super high as well. There was a survey done by EMC, and they said that 36% of companies reported back internal or external security breaches. So there's a lot of security breaches. We need to protect our data. And when these breaches happen, the survey found that 2.36 terabyte of data was the average loss. And that's a whole lot of data. And that's a scary amount of data. The average cost during these breaches or due to these breaches was $900,000. And that's a fortune. I mean, that could put a lot of companies out of business. And one more statistic, $555,000 was the average cost of unplanned downtime, with 22 hours being the average length. And I know this is just one survey. There's many surveys out there. Surveys are, kind of all over the board. But I think no matter which one you look at, the cost is always very high, and the downtime is always, frightening, horrifying, for the business and for our customers. And that's the one thing that all the surveys seem to have in common. And the cost of downtime and ransomware, in most cases, those are, far, far exceed the cost of data protection and disaster recovery solutions, that we're looking at in IT. And I lied that was the last stat. This is actually the last stat. Only 18% of those surveyed said that their current data protection solution would be able to meet future business challenges. So a lot of people are looking for new solutions. That's probably why you're on the event today. The good news is that companies have made major advances in availability, technology, and data protection. And I mean, I've been doing these events now for a few years, and I have seen these advances personally. Some really cool new features, cloud-based data protection, continuous replication for every application, automated failover, automated testing, high-speed recovery. You can get these solutions up and running, in no time, and then only pay typically when you use the solution. I mean, it varies based on the solution, but there's a lot of, really flexible pricing out there. The latest data protection solutions have also become more affordable, and they work, thanks to virtualization, pay-as-you-go pricing, this utility-based model, public cloud offerings that have data protection built in. So a lot of great solutions out there, new innovations, and that's exactly what you're going to learn about on the event today. My recommendations, to sum it up, do what makes your life in IT easier. Try to make yourself the hero of the organization thanks to some innovative, magical, software and hardware. Do what makes your data protection and DR as reliable and as affordable and easy as possible. Leverage the latest technology, cloud, virtualization, scalable DR, data protection solutions that work with the flip of a switch. Constantly educate yourself. That's what you're doing here. Good job. Kudos to you. And constantly test your solutions to ensure that you're ready. And I recently did a panel cast, which is kind of like a video interview with a handful of data protection experts. And by the end of the hour of our discussion, it seemed like every answer was coming back with test. How do you know if your solution is scalable? Well, test it. How do you know if your solution can recover quickly? Well, test it. How do you know if you get hit with ransomware and you have to recover every server and all your data, that it's going to scale and be able to do that in a reasonable amount of time? Well, test it. And fortunately, there is automated testing, but testing when it comes to data protection and DR is just so important. And that's, again, why this event, in my opinion, is important. We have answers. We have experts here to answer your questions and hopefully some solutions to help solve your challenges. And this is a question I'm curious about before I introduce our first presenter. That is, which of these are your top data protection or disaster recovery challenge? And this is a multi-select question. So if you have, a top 2 or a top 3, that's fine as well. And I will share the results with you because I want to see what the feedback is on this. So I'll just leave this up for a minute. The options here are scalability. Maybe you have too much data to protect and your solution it can't meet the demands. Maybe it's cost. It's just too expensive. You're looking for a more affordable solution. Maybe it's the speed. It's just not enough. My backups are running all the time. Can't get all this data backed up. Maybe it's the recovery speed. We need it to be faster. Maybe it's visibility. I know a lot of companies just struggle to know, is everything protected? I mean, I remember back in the day sitting there and reviewing the backup logs every morning. I would drink my coffee and I would review the backup logs. And there was hundreds of pages of backup logs, and it was not fun. And so, if you're in that boat, I know what you mean, and I have sympathy for you. So visibility could be a challenge. And then finally, testing. A lot of people need better testing, and they need it to be automated and really know that this solution is going to work for them. All right. Hopefully everyone has answered this question. Let me share the results of this one with you. And 63% said cost. Just simply justifying the cost is hard. And I can appreciate that. I know we need to get our executives involved in supporting disaster recovery and data protection, much more. We need things to help them, justify it in their mind. There's lots of scary statistics, but if we can find more affordable solutions and if we can justify it better, hopefully that will help. So after cost, 38% said visibility. They need better visibility into what it is that they're protecting and whether or not it's protected. And then after that, we had kind of a rough tie between testing, scalability, recovery, and backup speed. So thank you for answering that poll. Last poll before I introduce our first presenter. This is, what's your time frame for updating your existing or selecting new data protection and disaster recovery solutions? If you're here, you're probably interested in new solutions, trying to find out what's available. You're probably not very happy with the one you have, or else you wouldn't be shopping around. So just curious what your time frame is. I'll just leave that up for a minute. And again, thank you for all the great comments. Tons, over 150 now so far comments have come in, and we haven't even introduced the first presenter. So thank you so much for all the great feedback, people from around the world joining today's event. I encourage you to keep those comments coming during the presentations, but think of some questions. What questions do you have? How is this solution going to solve your problem? Where do you have confusion about how the solution works, or how it's priced, or how it does automated testing, how it does recovery? Keep those questions coming. All right, thank you everyone who answered that question. We do appreciate it. And now it's time to kick off today's Megacast. I'm excited to introduce Teresa Miller, who is a principal technologist at Cohesity. Teresa, thanks for being on the event today.
Thanks for having me. This is a pretty awesome topic.
I agree, and we're excited and honored to have you kicking it off. It's always good to have you. Take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, let's definitely get started. I find this topic of disaster recovery pretty interesting. Some of you may know a little bit about me. Many of you probably don't. I spent over 20 years working hands-on here in the industry, and disaster recovery was one of those topics that either companies did it or they didn't. And I noticed during your survey questions, it seemed like a lot of people and enterprises were having trouble getting these types of projects off the ground just because of cost. And I personally have seen that happen more than once, many, many times, where the intentions are there and it just doesn't work out. So anyway, so today the structure and my goals for our conversation today are, I'm going to start with a little bit about Cohesity. For those of you that are not familiar with us, I know when I'm sitting in your shoes, I want to kind of know who I might be working with or talking to. So we'll start out there. And then I'm going to talk more about data responsibility, and then we'll dive into how Cohesity can help you with disaster recovery. So a little bit about our company. We are we're here to redefine data management. We're a data protection solution. So we have a whole platform for you as it relates to your data, from backups and recovery to disaster recovery, archiving, etc. Our company was founded back in 2013 by Mohit Aaron. He was also one of the co-founders of Nutanix and one of the leads on the Google File system. And, we have a really, really fantastic, experienced team from a lot of really well-known companies. And from a growth perspective, I think this is pretty awesome personally. We've had 100% software revenue growth year over year, and 70% of our customers are enterprise. And lastly, we have some really fantastic investors. They're listed out here. I'm not going to read them off, but we've got a really, really strong foundation. So from a Gartner perspective, I do like to share this because I know many of you not only are thinking about disaster recovery, but you're also thinking about how you're managing your backup infrastructure and can it handle everything that you have in that complex enterprise of architecture you have deployed. So Gartner is saying that by 2022, which is just around the corner, more than 80% of enterprise data will be stored in scale-out storage systems, which is up 40% from today. And more than 50% of you are potentially not happy with your current backup infrastructure. So also pretty interesting. So I think it's a time of change for enterprises and how they're managing their data. So now, as I promised, I had mentioned we would talk about data responsibility. I like to talk about this a little bit because whether your data is on-prem or in the cloud, there's some big considerations and things that are different than they were 20 years ago or even 5 years ago. So ransomware is more prolific than ever, and it affects our enterprise data. So I thought this was pretty impressive, of course not in a positive way, but a new business will fall victim to ransomware every 11 seconds by 2021, according to Cybersecurity Ventures. That's a huge, huge number. Now, another one, different type of data risk are those national disasters. We hear about them in the news all the time. According to Our World in data last year, there were almost 300 reported national disasters. And I know the list for 2019 obviously is still growing, but there's constantly things, weather-related, fires, and more. Email also is another one of those areas where just the risk and potential for enterprise data impact has just skyrocketed. So this year, so far, phishing emails have increased 109% over just 2 years ago. So we really, really have to be careful with what we're opening. And data disasters as a whole, I know some statistics were already shared as we led into this presentation, but this one specifically, a data disaster can cause $5,600 per minute for an enterprise, according to Gartner. That's a lot of money. And so that, when you consider all of this and disaster recovery and being able to keep your business online, regardless of what happens, know that you are responsible for your data. I have a couple real-world scenarios that I also wanted to share, again, as you're thinking about data responsibility. And these are things that really happened to me. So I personally have spent a ton of time in the industry dealing with email, and I had a call from a C-level executive that couldn't find a message. And so this message was inadvertently fat-finger deleted. It happens. It happens to the best of us, right? We've all done it. And unfortunately, there was not a retention period in place where I could I can get it back. And so when you consider even this isn't like a full disaster recovery scenario where you're failing over to another data center, but this is a data disaster to this executive, and the only person responsible is me and the IT department, and trying to figure out how to get this data back. Unfortunately, in this case, it wasn't possible, and it forced us to change how we dealt with things in the long run. So take it as a learning opportunity. There wasn't a great backup or policy in place. This message was gone. So an unfortunate learning opportunity, but we move forward, and that's important as well. Here's another real-world situation. In this particular environment, we had people that were considered leads, owners of virtual machines. They spun them up, they created them, and in this particular case, that person brought their machine online but never set up a backup. And so what unfortunately happened is after some Windows updates, the whole machine just flat out corrupted. And we were very, very lucky because through a Microsoft support case, they were able to recover the machine, but it was tough. It took 24 hours. And when you think about not having access to a system or a data disaster or a full-on even data center outage, 24 hours is really, really not the best. So some lessons learned here is that even though support was able to get the machine back, having better defined RPOs and RTOs to avoid user impact and downtime is a big deal. And that in particular really translates into our topic today. So when it comes to disaster recovery, IT automation is a really big part of that. So let's kind of put ourselves in the mindset of the full-on data disaster where I want to fail over to a colo or maybe the cloud. The expectation is that things are going to work and that your RPOs and RTOs are going to work really well, right? Maybe you have defined that your disaster recovery failover is going to take a half hour or an hour, and it depends on how much infrastructure you have in your enterprise and what's critical. But if it's not automated well, things are not going to look well, and this reality can set in. It can be very painful. And so automation as a whole is so important to the success of your disaster recovery. So now, as I promised, we're going to talk a little bit about Cohesity and what we offer from a disaster recovery perspective. So recently, we introduced Cohesity Runbook. And what Runbook does is takes that on-prem virtual infrastructure that you have and will help you automate that disaster recovery failover. Specifically today, we do this to the cloud. And I know many of you had that cost concern. Whenever I look at disaster recovery and cloud, one huge consideration is that I can have copies of my data in the cloud and not have those machines running. So my cost implication is storage, and it is not compute focused until I bring that environment online. So it can keep costs at bay to be able to leverage the cloud. So what Cohesity Runbook does, as I was alluding to here, is it automates and orchestrates. It's an application that's available on our Cohesity marketplace, which is at marketplace.cohesity.com, runs right on our Cohesity data platform, and serves as an extension of our Cohesity interface. So let's take a closer look at that. We have really worked hard to simplify what disaster recovery can look like. I know personally, in environments I've worked in where we've had a colo and we've had to fail over, the process was very lengthy. If something in the network changed, we didn't necessarily go back to change the piece of the script that would have known about it. We get to testing day, and then all of a sudden things aren't quite working. So with Cohesity Runbook, we have a process that helps you understand that up front before you're faced with any form of disaster. So the design phase is really as simple as what you see on the screen here. What you're looking at are essentially 3 different virtual machines, and you can group these. So the first box on the top of the screen there could have 5 virtual machines in it, or it could have 50 virtual machines in it. Now, for simplicity's sake and what we're talking about today, there's just one. But ultimately, what that means in the screen is that the first server is going to come online, the second server is going to come online next, and the third one will come up following. So you have control over the order. You can add pauses because some machines have services that take longer to launch, like a SQL server might. You can add pauses before that server were to come online to service the rest of the enterprise. So just some examples, it's as simple as drag and drop in that design phase. Now, the validation phase is where you understand and get insights into whether or not this works. So you don't have to wait till testing day to find out if a network change that was done that you weren't aware of is going to impact your disaster failover ability. So the validate process, it's literally you end up clicking a button, it'll go through the flow, and it'll tell you if something's working or not. And you can see on this particular one, there's a little red circle with a line through it. That's actually indicative of a problem that needs to be fixed before any form of actual execution or disaster recovery failover could occur. So again, very visual, and you can test in advance without being in a real disaster or a tested disaster situation. And then the final step to this would be when you're ready to do your actual disaster failover to the cloud. And it's as simple as clicking execute, and then the process starts going. So essentially, these are the 3 steps to your disaster recovery failover when you're using Runbook. So let's talk a little bit more about the Runbook benefits. So our goal when we designed this was to really streamline those complex tasks. We really want you to feel the zen of a disaster, because disaster situations are stressful to begin with. Your job should be easy, and we're here to make sure that that is the case. So we'll automate your workloads over the hybrid cloud. We will orchestrate that workflow in a simple way, and you can even, I didn't mention this on the other screen, but you can even do groupings of applications. So like you can control the order and create separate flows. So maybe you do your core infrastructure first, and then you decide that you want your WordPress application that you host locally on a server to go next. You can wrap a lot of control around this, even down to the individual application level. From a design perspective, it really is as simple as designing workflows in minutes. What you're seeing is literally drag and drop, super easy. As I mentioned, you can add pauses, you can manage those dependencies, times. You can even add scripts. Because, like, for example, if you're failing over to the cloud, your IP address scheming might or should be a little bit different than what you're doing on-prem. And you can wrap that scripting right into your process so that it just happens automatically for you and everything comes online in a very seamless way. And the final set of points on this particular slide is that, we're really looking to help encapsulate your best practices so that what's going on in your environment and your best practices are followed, so that you're not dealing with errors and failures during a really, really tough situation. So Cohesity, we're really here to redefine data management. This particular slide there's a few things I want to call out here. So if we focus first on the production side of the screen and everything below it, what you're seeing here is a legacy solution, something that you may or may not be leveraging today. But I think it's very likely you have a deployment, a backup deployment that has media servers and master servers and tape libraries and target storage to be able to even just do basic protection of your environment. And oftentimes that is very fragmented, inefficient. It's hard to back up or update nodes. It's not always scalable. And so where we come in is, we really simplify things, make it efficient, make it scalable, and you can still protect all of the same information. Now, our goal, if you go over to the right side, over under the disaster recovery side, you're probably in a similar situation. You may not even be backing up your disaster recovery environment. That's a conversation to be had in itself. But nonetheless, if you're running with that legacy those legacy systems with tape libraries, again, media servers, it does become redundant, expensive, and even underutilized, because disaster recovery is really only for a disaster. And so introducing cohesivity in that capacity as well can really help you optimize, make sure things are cost effective, and you can even leverage that system outside of a disaster, so making it multi-purpose. And then I'm going to come over to the middle. So in the middle here, we have the hybrid and multi-cloud. We can help protect all of your data in any of these clouds that we have listed here, and we are S3 and NFS cloud compatible, so we can do even just basic archiving to the cloud if that's something that is of need. So even though we're talking about disaster recovery today, it's only a part of a larger opportunity and solution that we offer. So to round things out today, I'm going to switch back and just talk a little bit more about how we are solving the challenges you're faced with from a disaster recovery and automation perspective. So like you, or like me, I'm sure you are dealing with manual processes. I know that's been my experience with disaster recovery, or maybe it was scripted, but it's still, I had to step in to make that disaster recovery process occur. So, we're really working to automate and let you have that simple design canvas to do things in a simple way. We have that automated validation check so that there are not any surprises come a disaster or disaster recovery testing day, eliminating those errors. Our system, if you go from on-prem to cloud, will actually orchestrate VM format conversion. So that is a challenge that you could be faced with and may or may not have considered. So for example, if I go from on-prem VMware up to AWS, Cohesity will make sure that that format is compatible for you. So again, making sure that disaster is simple, seamless, and happens right away when it's time. Because of that, we also combat issues making it difficult to move your servers around. So that is another challenge we combat. Our validation check helps understand recovery failures in advance, but also when we were talking about the visual aspect where I said you could put multiple servers in one of those little boxes, we do instant mass recovery. So multiple servers can come online, and in the masses, like hundreds of servers, we can deal with that, and which makes sure that you're coming back online pretty quickly from that disaster. And finally, because we offer a solution that is not just disaster recovery focused, it can back up other aspects of your environment, in fact, all of it. You really have a single solution to work with. And I know in my experiences that sometimes the more vendors I had to work with, when it came to support situation, that became challenging. So if you have a single solution for everything, it really can simplify any potential troubleshooting you may need to do. So that actually wraps up my presentation. How are we doing on time? Do we have some time for questions?
Yeah, we have some time, just a few questions, I think, and we have quite a few questions actually that have come in. So maybe we can get to a few in our chat here, and then you might be able to answer some of them electronically as well, if that works.
Sure.
Let's see. While we do that, I'm just going to pop up this poll question and leave that up for the audience. I want to call everyone's attention to the question on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Cohesity solution? And just leave that up there. Stephen is asking, would this work seamlessly across private and public clouds?
So the way I would look at this, so if your private cloud, let's say you're running like a VMware virtualization solution to run that private cloud, and you're backing that up with Cohesity, then it would be very, very easy to have that failover occur to a public cloud like AWS. So yes is the short answer to that question.
Okay, great. Another question here, Michael is asking, is Cohesity Runbook available for download? Can you kind of clarify with Cohesity, how does the solution work? Like what would we need minimum to get started to use it to leverage the Runbook?
Yeah, so you would need the Cohesity Data Platform solution, and then out on our marketplace, we have applications that can be downloaded, and Runbook would be found there, and essentially it gets installed onto the Cohesity Data Platform, and from there you can start using it.
Got it, okay. Another question here, Bill is asking about the minimum startup costs and incremental costs, and I know it's real hard to go into exact dollars, here, because obviously the situation varies greatly, but maybe we should just talk about like the entry point, like with Cohesity. What's the entry point? Do we buy one node on premises and then you could replicate to the cloud, or how would you get started?
Yeah, so I agree with you. Cost is something that I don't step into discussing. I think you're right. It's more of an architecture answer here. Now, Bill, if you are interested in cost, we can have somebody reach out to you about that. But to go back to the architecture, so the minimum for this to work would be you would have the Cohesity data platform. I would recommend having it on-prem. On-prem, we offer an appliance, or we offer a virtual edition for VMware, and we also offer that for Hyper-V. You don't need to buy separate Data Protect for any of those different platforms that I just mentioned. You really just need one, and we always sell redundant. So you typically the nodes are just built out to be redundant in threes, if I'm not mistaken. And that's, once the Runbook software is on there, that's actually really all you need to be able to configure it and get it staged to be able to do a failover to the cloud. So
okay,
yeah, that's it.
Very nice, very nice. Well, there's some more questions there, some more very technical questions we probably shouldn't try to get into in our discussion here, but I'll leave all those in the queue for you, Teresa, to maybe respond to electronically. I know the audience appreciates that. Really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I will definitely stay on and answer some of those questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. And thank you to Cohesity. Excellent. And thank you to Cohesity for supporting the event today. For more information, visit cohesity.com. Also, check out the handout that's available right there for download in the audience console if you click on the Handouts tab. And now it's time to give away our first Amazon $500 gift card. We have a gift card going out to Doug McCaskill of Louisiana. Congratulations, Doug McCaskill of Louisiana. You won an Amazon $500 gift card. We've got a lot more prizes to give out and grand prizes as well, so make sure you stay tuned for those.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Stefan Manley, Chief Technologist at Druva. Take it away, Stefan.
I'm here. Thanks for having me. All right. So most of you that have been in the backup world probably know that the rest of your business thinks of backup as a boat anchor. You know, while they're trying to aggressively transform the business, they're moving forward, and suddenly backup slows them down. For example, let's take a company like Andritz, wildly innovative manufacturing company with lots of remote sites. And they're fully virtualized, and they're talking about modernizing their infrastructure and next-gen applications. And somebody raises their hand and says, that's good. What are we going to do about the tape backups we have in our sites? The air goes out of the balloon. So what do you do in those cases? You know, how do we solve these problems? Because you've got your organization that really wants to move forward quickly. How are you going to turn backup from being the boat anchor that slows everybody down and turn it into something where you can move quickly forward? Well, in the case of Andritz, they looked at a SaaS solution like Druva to say, this is how we totally revolutionize how we do backup, and we turn it from the boat anchor to actually something that puts more wind in the sails. And that's why we at Druva think that SaaS is really the heart of data protection for the cloud era. Now, one of the interesting things as I've met backup customers for the last few decades is the people who run backups have said in the last couple of years, everything is more stressful than it's been at any time they can remember in the past. And I've got bad news and good news. The bad news is, you're right, it's harder than it's ever been. The good news is, you're not alone. Everybody else feels the same way. And the cause of this is a lot of factors coming together at once. The first, as you look at this chart, is the technology that your application developers are using to build apps that drive the business forward. Well, they're adopting new technology as fast as it comes out. You know, from the old physical client server to virtual machines, containers, and hey, serverless is a thing now. And while in the backup industry we've grown accustomed to being able to handle technology changes, the other axis is a little harder. And that's the business's desire to shift to a new kind of consumption model. You know, the world of, I have data centers where I make capital expenditures and purchase software licenses in perpetuity. Everybody wants to shift away from that to get to more of this pay-as-you-go cloud sort of model. We're used to technology shifts in the backup industry. We're a lot less accustomed to dealing with consumption model changes. So like I said, if you feel stressed out, if you feel like you've got more pressure on you than you ever had before, you're right. But you know what? It's harder than that even. So in the things that we traditionally do, we're being expected to do more. So take ransomware. You know, one of the great new industries, if you're not a nice person, may have replaced paparazzi. The amount of recovery costs that go into dealing with a ransomware event are increasing because they're getting better at locking you out from your data and making noise about it if you don't pay up. And while the rest of the organization looks and says, well, we could do X, Y, and Z, the fallback always is, well, the backup team can always save us because if something goes truly horribly wrong, clearly we'll just be able to recover to a point in time before ransomware got infected. Let's just hope that everything was air-gapped and done properly. How about disasters? Right? Now, this is something we've dealt with for years, whether it's natural disasters or machine failures, or of course my personal favorite, somebody made a really big mistake on accident. And so we're used to being able to recover from disasters. That's part of what we've done in the backup and data protection industry. The challenge now, though, is one, data's become so much more important for businesses that not being able to recover quickly from a catastrophic disaster often can spell the end of a business entirely. In fact, about 50% of businesses that hit a disaster a year later are no longer in business. And second, the amount of data you have to recover, the amount of infrastructure you have to recover, the complexity of that infrastructure, virtualization, containers, etc., makes disaster recovery much more difficult than it ever was. And then finally, if things weren't hard enough, governments and regulatory industries are saying, oh, by the way, we've got a whole new pile of regulations for you, whether it's in privacy or just extending relations in different vertical areas. So not only are you dealing with technology shifts, consumption model shifts, but you're being expected to do more and more inside the infrastructure. And not surprisingly, with not a lot more resources. And so I think a lot of people have probably had the same conversation that I've had with a lot of our customers, where they said, well, look, management came and said, here's your goals for the year. All we're really looking for you in the data protection space to do is, well, first, we're moving to cloud. We have a cloud mandate. And we'd really like for the data protection team to help us, one, maybe be that first foothold, or at a bare minimum, help us migrate data to the cloud. And of course, once we have things running in the cloud, you've got to protect what's up there too. And we're going to start consolidating data centers, maybe getting rid of standby, disaster recovery sites. So if you could maybe handle disaster recovery across, in a smaller data center footprint, and by the way, cover all the remote offices, because again, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in retail, if you're in a lot of those industries, those are just as critical to the business as the core data center. That'd be great. We do have to worry about ransomware and other cyber attacks, so if you could just lock that down for us. And finally, the CEO said he was at Build-A-Bear last weekend, and he ran into another CEO buddy of his at Build-A-Bear, because that's where CEOs hang out now. And they talked about how they're doing analytics against their data, and we should get some of that too, because I've heard AI and ML is the hot new thing. So again, if you could just sort of cover all that in the next few months, that'd be great. So again, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel really stressed, you should. So what's the answer to all of this? Well, you need to start looking for a solution that's going to deliver everything that that's expected of you. And so the first step in all this is you're going to want to shift the business model, right? That whole consumption model shift to a pay-for-use where you get on-demand capacity. You're going to want to eliminate complexity, relentless automation, because the only way you're going to deal with the technology shifts where application developers are building faster with newer technology is to eliminate the complexity, to not be Dr. No and Dr. Slow. Can you support this app? Can you support this infrastructure? Instead of saying, we'll get to it in 3 months, or that's not on our roadmap, we're able to be dynamic enough that we can support whatever you need. And you've got to evolve your role. You can't be spending your time just babysitting the backup infrastructure, dealing with hardware scaling or tapes or babysitting backup environments. You've got to really be able to get to a scalable self-service model. And when you talk scale, it's not just scale up or scale out. It's the ability to scale up, but also the ability to scale down, because the environment doesn't just move in one direction all the time. And finally, because of all the new regulations, find a way to get central management over everything, but localization to be able to meet all the different compliance regulations, and frankly, just to allow yourself to scale without needing more people. So again, if you're going to handle all those challenges the business is throwing at you, you've got to find solutions that can step up and meet those needs. And I know that sounds like a lot. It's an overwhelming place to be. And that's why I think when you look at the direction that people are going across any part of the industry, the answer to some extent has to be SaaS. You can't put these things together anymore. There's custom building of your own environment, as fun as it was, just isn't going to scale to meet the kind of needs the business had. And we've seen this in the application space with ServiceNow, Workday, Salesforce. And we see it in the tool space, Twilio for messaging, GitHub for development. we see it in the database space. The number of people using Aurora and Dynamo and next-gen databases in the cloud. If that's what your development environment is using, if that's the types of things that people are resorting to make the data that you need to protect, you've got to get on that same footing, which means your data protection has to move to SaaS as well. Now, when you think of SaaS data protection, what does that really mean? Right? It's very easy. Well, we do SaaS. All you have to do is 2 capital letters and 2 lowercase letters in between, and you're SaaS. Well, there's some basic principles, I think, in a relevant SaaS architecture that you need to be able to fit. And if you can fit those, then you can start to get that value we talked about before. And again, the first and foremost here is you've got to be able to scale on demand. And that's for capacity, that's for performance, it's the whole deal. Because if you think about the way we've traditionally worked in environments, as the picture shows, you buy a certain amount of physical gear, and sometimes you don't need as much as the physical gear offers, so you're kind of wasting resources, and sometimes you wish you had more, so you're actually sort of scrambling to catch up. And once you've overflowed, you say, oh, okay, we better go buy more. Oh, well, things then dipped. Now you're wasting resources again. It's this almost impossible mission to try to keep up with what the environment needs, because as good as anybody's prediction algorithms are, the reality is you can't predict what tens, hundreds, or thousands of developers are going to do on any given day, any given week, any given month. And so the only way to really make this work is to have a scalable pool of resources that, again, can scale up, but it can also scale down, so you're only paying for what you need. If you can't scale in both directions, you're not SaaS. The second thing is you shouldn't be babysitting infrastructure. Running in the cloud is a complicated thing to do. That's why you see all of these SaaS companies have large organizations that are built on tuning the infrastructure in the cloud. So if you're going to be SaaS, you shouldn't have to bring your own cloud and start to babysit and manage what the environment looks like. It should happen for you, no installation, no maintenance. One way to tell if you have a SaaS solution or not, if you can't get something up and running in 15 minutes or less, whether it's a car insurance quote or your backup, you're probably not running SaaS. The third step is you've got to be able to optimize your path to the cloud. So there's optimizing in the cloud, and then there's how do I move data to and from the cloud. And there's a lot of technologies and techniques that should happen as you get there. But the main thing you should think about as a user is there's an expert coming helping me figure out the best way to make this happen. And I don't have to worry that when the disaster hits or when I have new backup jobs that suddenly I don't have enough network, or I don't, I'm hand-holding and babysitting this on my own. It should just work. And then the final kind of, way to tell, are you SaaS or are you not SaaS? The final classification question is, can new services just pop up pretty seamlessly? Because on a SaaS platform, you should be able to release every week, every couple weeks, new features and functionality that the customer base should just be able to absorb, which is a huge difference than sort of our traditional backup where it was, 18 months, it'll take me 18 months to develop the feature, it'll take 18 months to get it deployed in your environment, so 3 years from now you'll see the work that I just started today. In the SaaS world, you should be able to see it, soak in it, enjoy it, get value from new services as they come out without having to do anything on your end. So what does it mean to be SaaS? Scale up and down, automatically install, no maintenance, have optimizations on the front end and the back end, and be able to get services as you go. And not surprisingly, given who's giving this presentation, you can see that in the Druva platform. So let's just start with the basics on the beginning. You have a number of workloads. And again, let's say that someone's come to you and said, Mike Andritz, hey, we need to be able to streamline our backup flow. Maybe this is part of our journey to the cloud, and we want backup to be one of the first workloads that makes it to the cloud. And we've got a variety of workloads, some VMs, some NAS, some applications, etc. Well, what you want to be able to do is just say, those backups now go to the cloud. Now, in the back end of the cloud, in the SaaS platform, Druva is using, compute infrastructure like EC2 and configuration information in RDS and storing metadata in DynamoDB. We're doing all these clever things and storing the data on the right tier of storage to make sure that your costs are an acceptable level for you. That's what we do. But there's a reason that's in a box, because you shouldn't have to care. So it's fun to be able to talk about it, and there's endless numbers of people here who would love to explain to you in detail all the amazing things we do in the back end. But to me, the most amazing thing we do on the back end is that we make it so you don't have to care. Your data gets backed up. When you need to restore, any point in time that you backed up, you're able to restore that. No problem. But now let's talk about those additional services. Great, I got my backups done. Bad things happen. Disasters happen. How do I recover from a disaster? Well, you could always just restore your data back on-prem. That's fine. Full restore traditionally, like we've always done. But what if it's a bigger disaster at your site? What do you do then? Well, one of the real virtues of cloud, and again, another way that you can tell someone's a SaaS vendor or not, is that there's this amazingly large, almost feels infinite pool of resources there available to you when you need them. Not like you have to pay for a standby data center with standby copies of data and standby servers just waiting for something to go wrong. You're not paying for that standby resource because it's just there in this massive pool. But if and when something goes wrong, and we hope it doesn't, but if it does, you could always spin up those resources, the compute, immediately pull the data in minutes, and have your application up and running in your cloud. Think about that. No need to have a standby data center. No need to pay for standby resources. Spin up when the disaster happens. Get yourself, near instantly up and walking and up and running. And then when you need to, sure, fail back to your data center. Think of the pressure, the stress that takes off of you. Now, just to give you a little better picture of what that looks like, so again, as a SaaS platform, your data was up in the Druva cloud. Now, one of the key things that we often talk about in our space is security. You hold the keys to your data. You don't want me looking at your data. I'm a very curious person. So when you do your disaster recovery, that's into your cloud because, again, your cloud, your data, your keys, your security. Druva's not looking at your data. Second thing is, got to be optimized, right? If I don't have a standby copy, that's fine. It saves you money. But I also need to be able to recover your data in minutes so you're recovering from the disaster quickly. And the last part, which is critical, because when disasters happen, it's always at the worst time. You're going to be stressed out. Probably the person running the disaster recovery is not the expert. It's somebody who is probably sweating buckets of sweat, terrified about, am I gonna break everything if I try to run the disaster recovery? One-click failover, one-click failback. You can't mess it up. And hey, if you want to train your teams up and make sure everything works, you can do unlimited testing. Because again, spin up the resources, try the disaster recovery. It's totally separate from your production environment, totally separate from your backup environment. So it's isolated. And again, you pay for the minute or two or however long you want to run your disaster recovery test, and then the resources go away and you stop paying. So it truly makes disaster recovery something that can work for you. But of course, that's just your data on-prem. And this is part of a cloud journey. You're going to be running more and more applications in the cloud. That's just life. How do you protect the data in the cloud? Because just because the data is in the cloud doesn't mean it's safe. And so Druva also offers for you the ability to back up, recover, disaster recover, get governance, and manage and optimize the data that is born in the cloud, so that you can also recover that environment if something goes wrong. If there's a regional outage. If, again, somebody makes a mistake, you can also recover the data that's in the cloud. Because again, for this to be a SaaS platform, I want to be able to cover all the issues that you're going to have, not just one or two. And so that's why we talk about Druva as being this unified SaaS platform. Hey, you have endpoints, you have data centers, you have cloud native workloads. You want to be able to do basic data protection, disaster recovery, governance, analytics. It all comes in one as part of the platform. Because again, when you're SaaS, you can keep adding functionality. You can take advantage of the scalable cloud resources, and you don't have to change your environment as you go. And so, whether you're an innovative company like Andritz, or you're just starting your journey, some things to remember. Fun facts about Druva that you might just want to keep in the back of your mind. We're going to lower your costs up to 50%. If you don't believe me, give us a call. We can walk you through it. And part of it's because you're not going to have any stranded capacity. Scale up, scale down, and you're not going to be paying maintenance. Again, like your favorite car insurance quote, you can be up and running in 15 minutes or less. You can get that instant recovery, and we have the highest security certifications. And again, try it out. This isn't like some crazy multi-year commitment. This isn't something that you're committing, you're selling your soul to get. It's very easy to try out in a small area. In fact, that's why we'd recommend next steps. Call us, get a demo. See if there's actually beef behind the bull that I just gave you. If that passes muster, maybe try a trial. Again, you can get this up and running so quickly. Just get a feel for it. And once you've got that, you can really see if you believe our TCO calculations. And if you do, then maybe we're part of the answer to helping you feel not overwhelmed anymore, not like you're being beset by requirements that you just can't cover, but that you can actually get ahead of this and lead your company's transformation to cloud, because you're going SaaS just the way that the application developers and the rest of the teams are. And so with that, I open up for Q&A, and thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, great presentation, Stefan. Really appreciate that. Let's see, we do have some questions here for you from the audience. First one, Jimmy's asking, who's responsible for the data that's stored in the cloud? If there was a breach, does Druva have access to the data, or is it just the client, the customer?
Right. So that's a great question, and this really gets to the security piece. Is the data that's stored in the Druva cloud is encrypted by keys that the client has. So only the client can get at the data. Druva is not able to look at your data in any way, and no one inside Druva can see what kind of data you have. It is completely controlled by the client. It's their keys. That's the only way that you should trust, really, the environment. If you control the keys, you control your data.
Okay, excellent. Another question here, they're asking, how do you handle backup retention compliance in a SaaS solution?
It's actually pretty similar to running any sort of traditional environment, and that's basically you're going to set sort of your schedule in terms of how many backups you need to keep. Do you need to keep a certain number of quarterlies, monthlies, weeklies? That kind of scheduling remains the same. Now, Druva on the back end with some of our technology, we may be tiering your data to less and less expensive storage, so that if you do have long-term retention, you're going to get some of the cost savings that cloud offers. But it is still the client that determines how long the data should be retained, because ultimately, you're the ones with the regulations, you're the ones with the best the corporate governance requirements that you need to meet. Okay, excellent. I wanted to call everyone's attention to the question I just brought up on the screen there. I should have brought it up just a little bit earlier, but want to make sure you saw it. What additional information would you like about the Druva solution? Another question here, William is asking, what about implementation and maintenance? If they need help implementing it and then ongoing maintenance, how does that work with Druva? Yeah, absolutely. So Druva does have, a sales team, a sales engineering team, a post-sales team, a customer success team, all these sorts of things. So, in terms of, setting up things like the clients and the application agents and all that, we're certainly there to help just the same as any sort of traditional backup vendor. Obviously, some of the big wins are there are no boxes to set up, no media servers to set up, those sorts of things. But yeah, we're still there with you. This is not a, hey, you have to go do this all on your own. Good luck, right? We are still there to partner with you because there are questions to be answered in terms of, what kind of network bandwidth do you want to size for being able to go up to the cloud? Again, what kind of schedules do we want to set up? Which data sets do you want to back up? What are your retention periods? So we're still there working with you along the way. This is not a, hey, you're completely on your own kind of solution.
Okay, excellent. Another question here, and that is, what are some of the charges included with the SaaS consumption model?
Yeah, that's actually a really key one, and I should have brought that up in the presentation, so I appreciate that question. There's a lot of people, if you sort of are new to cloud, or if you're not new to cloud, either way, there's Amazon and Google and Azure. Cloud has a lot of variable charges, right? There's a lot of little line items. And when you try to roll your own cloud, you're often surprised by a bunch of those different charges. Wow, compute's a little more expensive than I thought. I didn't realize I was paying for that particular piece of technology. One of the big ones is egress fees. When I pull data out, I'm getting charged for that. And so when you roll your own cloud, you can find yourself very surprised by the bill, especially not just if you're running restores, but even doing things like cleaning up data, garbage collection, all those sorts of things. With a SaaS solution like Druva, all those costs are Druva's costs. Those are not passed along to the customer. The customer gets a fixed cost for their environment, and Druva is the one that takes care of egress fees, ingress fees, all those sorts of things. So it's all bundled into one simple price, rather than you having to sort of figure out the 23 different components that make up a solution. And oh my gosh, why was my bill in 6 digits this month? So that's an excellent point. That you want all the costs wrapped up in one, so you have again predictability and cost confidence.
Okay, I like that. Another question, this might be a common point of confusion. Do people really back up data that's born in the cloud? So if I have a cloud app that it started there and the data's all there, do I still have to back it up, and why?
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons why. The first is, let's say you're storing the data on an EBS volume in Amazon. Just pick one. Amazon has been very public about the reliability of those particular drives, right? And this isn't S3, right? This is the block storage, is about 99.5%, which means there's a good chance that if you have a big environment, you'll lose some data. Now, most people that use Amazon also know that those drives get backed up to S3 as part of Amazon snapshots. So that's good, right? You've got bits floating around in different places. What you need is what backup has always, I think, been pretty good at, which is you need a catalog of where everything is and a mechanism by which to restore the point in time you need and to restore where you need. So I think as you go more and more towards applications in the cloud, it becomes a little less about the data movement because the cloud provider is doing a lot of that movement, but it becomes more about what's the metadata I need to track the catalog, and what's the relationship between different data sets so I can recover an application, as opposed to, okay, I recovered one VM. That wasn't my application. Or even worse, I recovered one container. All right, 23 more to go. The interest in the cloud is going to be much, that we see with people is, I'm working at a scale, help me understand where all my copies are, how I can recover those copies, and keep them consistent as an application, as opposed to lots of little individual piece parts. Because in the cloud, bad stuff happens in the cloud just like it does in your data center. Things breaking is not unique to just one location, unfortunately.
Absolutely, yeah. And just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean it's protected.
Yeah,
A lot of people
right.
forget that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Stefan, this has been great. We've received a lot of great questions. Someone said they want to do a POC with Druva. That's awesome. I'm queuing up a number of technical questions here for you in the queue. If you don't mind getting back to those, we appreciate it. Really great having you on the event today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
And thank you to Druva for supporting today's event. Check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console to learn more. Also check out druva.com and do a POC like Sammy said that they want to do here as well. So awesome. Thank you. And with that, it's time for a grand prize giveaway and a gift card as well. So we have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Mark Haloti from North Carolina. Mark Haloti from North Carolina. And our first grand prize, a Microsoft Surface, is going to Steve Layton from Colorado. Congratulations, Steve Layton from Colorado. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Kevin Ridings, Cisco Alliance Systems Engineer at Veeam. Kevin, are you there?
Hello, hi, and I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for being on the event, Kevin. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Hi guys, so yes, my name's Kevin Ridings. I'm an Alliance Systems Engineer for Veeam Software. And what we're really going to be discussing about today is cloud data management with Cisco. And we're going to be covering a number of areas. We're going to be covering cloud data retention, data portability, and security and compliance. But just before we really get stuck in, there's just a few things that I want to go through. We've got a little bit of structure to the presentation. We're going to look at some numbers about Veeam, but then we are really going to get stuck into the cloud data management. We're going to look at the Veeam and Cisco options, and then there's a little bit of a call to action towards the end of the session. So, just some numbers really about Veeam, and some of the numbers that we really like to talk about. Today we have north of 365,000 customers, but the number that we're most proud of is our Net Promoter Score. You can see plus 75 there of our Net Promoter Score, which is sort of in line with Apple and Southwest Airlines. So we're really quite happy that our customers are happy with our post-sales and support infrastructure. Our customers do seem to like what we do. So, cloud data management. What we're going to be looking at here is really how Veeam can help lead in that cloud data management space by really delivering a new set of capabilities across AWS, Microsoft Azure, Azure Stack, and even IBM Cloud. And of course, thousands of service providers as well that we interact with. We break our cloud data management features really into three stacks, and we're going to be looking at those today. So we're going to be looking at cloud data retention, so that's that simplified, expandable use of object type storage. We're going to be looking at data portability, so the ability to recover into almost any location, and we're also going to be looking at a number of security and compliance options. So, without further ado, I'm going to dive straight into the cloud data retention piece with Veeam Cloud Tier. So Veeam Cloud Tier is really about delivering unlimited capacity for your retention. And it's really about long-term retention. You would generally want to keep a short-term retention, a handful of restore points, logically close to your infrastructure. But being able to scale this out to Object Store really does deliver some great benefits. Object Store being traditionally quite low cost, really simple to consume, and its nature of being elastic, it can expand in a non-disruptive way in the back end. There are some unique things that we do here though at Veeam to make that particularly easy to use. One of the things that we do, in fact one of the things we don't do, is when we're moving data out to the Object Store, this is a free feature. We don't charge. There's no cloud tax for moving that data out to the Object Store. Obviously, you would still need to pay for the cloud provider's storage costs, but there is no hidden cloud tax for moving that data to that other location, to that Object Store. And of course, we support many different types of object store, so no real vendor lock-in in that scenario. But let's take a look at what that looks like. So with Veeam Cloud Tier, you would have perhaps on-prem a performance tier, so keeping those handful of restore points that I mentioned a few minutes ago, all safely on-prem for very fast recovery and obviously quite fast ingress as well for that first pass of backup. But then, as your backups get older and you want that long-term retention for compliance, we can take those out to all the supported cloud providers. But let's look at a little bit more detail because we do this very efficiently. So within an on-prem Veeam backup architecture, a full backup is seen as a VBK file. And you can see within the construction of that VBK file, we have some green blocks and we have some red metadata. We always have 3 copies of that metadata, just in case something happens to that metadata. We're still aware of what's in those files. And the reason for that is all our backup files are self-contained usable objects. They don't require access to a database or any external catalog. They are self-contained and usable if you have nothing else left. But when we start to move data out to Object Store, we perform some efficiencies. So what we actually do is we break the backup file into chunks and we move those chunks out to the Object Store. And that allows us to then dehydrate that backup file. We copy the metadata to the Object Store as well, but we're able to dehydrate that particular backup file. So leaving a representation within the local data stores of the particular backup. Now that really helps with recovery. So we've broken that file up into chunks and we've sent those out to the Object Store. But then once we actually want to perform a recovery, because we hold the metadata back on-prem, whilst we're performing a recovery, and some of the data exists within the Object Store, some may exist on-prem, we're only required to bring back the blocks that are required, the chunks of data that are required from that Object Store without the need for a full recovery, which really does help for a very efficient use of that Object Store. Obviously, with the ingress-egress charges that the cloud provider might be charging you, it's really quite important to be able to make that process as efficient as possible. So the supported extents that we have within our cloud tier, it's pretty much any S3 compatible object. It can be S3 and also S3 infrequent access today. There will be more coming in version 10, Microsoft Azure Blob, and IBM Cloud. Just on the right-hand side there, you can see a number of on-prem type solutions that also are supported. But pretty much if it's an S3 compatible object store, we will be able to use and leverage its capabilities. So moving through to cloud mobility. So that's really quite an important thing within cloud data management. Within cloud mobility, there are a number of things that I just want to talk about here. And before I actually dive straight into the slide, I want to talk about our new licensing model. So that's the Veeam Universal Licensing Model. Within the Veeam Universal Licensing Model, we license workloads. If that workload is on-prem, sat on a traditional hypervisor, if that workload moves to a cloud provider, the license moves with it. You don't need to relicense that workload. If that then comes back to an on-prem or a private cloud, a hybrid cloud, the license again moves with it. So the licensing really does support that whole cloud mobility piece. But from a feature point of view here, what I wanted to talk about was the options of restoration and migration and mobility here. So if Veeam has protected a particular workload, whether that be a virtual machine sat on a traditional hypervisor like VMware or Hyper-V, or perhaps it's an agent protection, so that maybe that's a physical architecture, or even a cloud piece of architecture. If we've protected it and it's within our Veeam repository, we have the ability to recover it as an Azure VM or even an EC2 instance within AWS. And that's a 2-click option. We handle all the manipulation and orchestration and changes within the particular workload, and we're able to recover it and boot it as a particular virtual machine sat in AWS as Azure. The use cases for these could be migration, could be in the event of a disaster. You need to get some important workloads up in a different location that you perhaps don't have your own secondary location. You can start to bring these up in the clouds that we mentioned here. Of course, Azure Stack as well is a third option here. So it really helps with that cloud mobility piece. So what I want to talk about next is our Veeam Data Labs, and then some very specific features that came quite recently within our Veeam Data Labs. So the data labs themselves, and it's really about looking after compliance requirements and security of data restores. So that's really around some of the newer features. And very important in Europe, GDPR. So if you have customers that hold data in Europe, we can help with some of the GDPR requirements around recoverability, especially around the right to be forgotten piece within the data sets. So just dive into sort of an architecture slide here. Veeam Data Labs are about spinning up workloads in an isolated piece of the environment that we create from our backups. We use our patented vPower streaming technology to be able to bring these back in isolation, and we can even use this for automatic recovery verification. So we have a particular feature called Sure Backup. So it's about guaranteeing, so for compliance and of course security, guaranteeing that your backups are in fact recoverable. We can test them right to the application layer. So we initially test a virtual machine layer, then the operating system, but then really where the value is of the particular workload, the application, we can test for that in an automated, scheduled way. You're not around, we can do this and send you a report. So automatic recovery verification is a particularly strong feature within our data labs. But some of the other use cases really are around really increasing innovation, really. So that gives us the ability to maybe use it for dev, test, so DevOps, maybe patch testing and upgrades. So you're spinning up not something like production, you're spinning up an hours ago or last night's copy of production. So for things like patch testing and upgrades, vulnerability assessments and forensics, really very powerful here. So you're not having to keep a traditional dev, test, troubleshooting environment patched in line with production and keeping that data set in line with production. You have the ability to do this from your backup architecture, really delivering more value from that data held within your backups, not just that insurance policy. So it's really about getting the most value from that. But I mean, compliance and analytics, so the ability to even data warehouse a particular maybe database held within your backups and you don't want the load on your production architecture, that's another option that's capable here within our particular data labs functionality. And even we spoke a second ago about Sure Backup, so guaranteeing the recovery of your backups. We also have disaster recovery simulation. So within our main product set, Veeam Backup and Replication, there is true replication between architectures. So failover, failback, as you would expect. But what we have as well alongside Sure Backup is Sure Replica. So you can do non-disruptive replica failover testing to prove that when you invoke your disaster recovery plans, you can have great confidence that they're actually going to work because you've been able to test them in a non-disruptive way. So two particular features I want to draw attention to within our data labs, and staged restore is one of these. So it's the capability to provide data management before a restore. So in Europe, when you're constrained by GDPR, there are certain things that you can't bring back into production. So in this scenario, John Smith has been entered into the database of a construction company, and he has, after that fact, asked to be forgotten. And that's a perfectly normal right. Within GDPR, you're asked to be forgotten, and you are removed from their data sets, production data sets to be clear. But then there has been something going wrong within that database, that there has been a requirement for recovery. So the organization, if they brought that production database with John Smith's personally identifiable information in there back into production, they would be in breach of GDPR. So with this staged restore functionality, it gives us the ability to recover that database into an isolated area. We are then able to interact with that workload and run some deletion scripting to remove John Smith's data from this, and then progress to recover that workload into production. So it gives you the ability to have that manipulation of that data, that management of that data before moving it into production. A very similar feature we have around if you're compromised by a virus, perhaps ransomware, but really about being compromised by a virus. And it uses a very similar technology. So if you're compromised by a virus, you perhaps would then go through your environment and clean it, and then perhaps still find some workloads that you were not able to clean, and you decide to recover from backup. You then have the risk, which I've seen many times over the years, you recover that particular workload and you go ahead and reinfect your entire environment. With Secure Restore, we have the ability, post the infection, we have the ability to recover any given workload into isolation. Hopefully, since the infection, the attack has occurred, the antivirus vendors have produced some fixes, and we can inject that antivirus protection and fixing into that isolated environment to attempt to clean that workload before bringing it back into production. But even if that's not possible, it's in isolation, you can detect that it is as infected as production. You can step back and go back to an older workload, trying to find a data set that is not infected, of course. But if the antivirus vendors have actually released the ability to fix those workloads, we can fix those workloads and then again progress into production. So really quite a powerful feature around security and compliance on those two features there. So let's really focus now on the Veeam and Cisco better together piece. We've got great integration into the Cisco product portfolio. We've got integration, which we'll talk about in a second, with Cisco HyperFlex. Obviously, we have with the converged infrastructure, we have great storage integration into the NetApp, IBM, and underlying Dell architecture for that, as I said, converged architecture. Great stories, great relationships around Cisco UCS. And the power of those UCS devices for multiple objects within the Veeam architecture. And then some standard solutions around the Cisco UCS framework. So if we look here at the sort of small to large, almost t-shirt sizing of solutions really around the Cisco UCS 240, but really where the power comes in is with the 3260. The amount of compute and storage that you can get together in those 3260s really gives a great rapid restore capability around all the application item recoveries for Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, Active Directory, Oracle. Really gives that great performance around recovery. And really has the ability to be that first stage of repository. Then we can perhaps go to that unlimited scale-out architecture of cloud tier. But as I said, we have great integration with Cisco HyperFlex storage. So you have your VMs sat on Cisco HyperFlex. Pretty unique to this solution is to get fully application consistent backups. We don't need to take a hypervisor-based snapshot. We don't need to inject an agent into the workload. We can get fully application consistent backups across Active Directory, Exchange, SharePoint, SQL, Oracle, without the need for those agents or even a hypervisor-based snapshot. It's offloaded to the HyperFlex snapshot mechanism, which makes for a really powerful and really robust and performant backup solution. Really helps improve your recovery time objectives and your recovery point objectives also. So when it comes to making your backup architecture perhaps as highly available as your production architecture, what we have here is the ability to run Veeam's services on top of a HyperFlex solution. So high availability for the Veeam services. So our Veeam services on HyperFlex become as highly available as a traditional production environment would be. If something fails, it fails over to another node. If it fails completely, we can recover it from a HyperFlex snapshot in seconds, and the underlying storage again is non-disruptively scalable and available. Really for the customers that really focus on SLAs, really tight SLAs. So if we're looking at around a big restoration that has maybe a 15-minute recovery time objective, if something breaks within that restore mechanism, you might breach that 15-minute RTO. But running all the Veeam services on top of the HyperFlex solution gives you the ability to recover those in seconds and continue with the recovery. It is really quite a powerful solution here. I've been asked to draw attention to our Veeam on Virtual. So that's our premier virtual event where we have speakers from Veeam, speakers from our partner framework, our alliance framework, and there is some really great content delivered within the Veeam on Virtual. I really encourage everybody from partners and users to attend. There will be content post the event as well, but it is really quite a great event to attend to get some more Veeam knowledge than we've been through today in this quite short session. So just a quick call to action before I sort of finish up the content and we perhaps go look at some questions is, well, don't take our word for it. Try it yourself. All our products are available with a 30-day trial without limitation on function, all fully functional. Give us a call. Give your local sales team, your local partner sales team a call. And also, please take a look at the resources that are available on Veeam.com. There's so much there, so much rich media, some training, great amount of detail on content within our website. So with that, I will maybe let's take a look at some questions or hand back to.
Yeah, great presentation. Kevin, we do have some questions for you. Let's see. First one, Ryan is asking, how about licensing with Veeam and HyperFlex? Is their pricing available based on the core of the server? Any ideas on that one?
Yes, we do have. If you're just looking at protecting virtual machines, perhaps on VMware on top of HyperFlex, it is possible to license per socket. So that's an occupied physical CPU socket within those hosts. If you're looking at a heterogeneous environment, so protecting more than just VMs sat on HyperFlex, I would recommend the Veeam Universal licensing, as that's very mobile, very flexible. But the socket licensing is still available for protecting VMware VMs and Hyper-V VMs.
Okay, excellent. And while we do some more Q&A, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Veeam solution? I'll just leave that up for everyone to answer. Another question here, John is asking, I currently have Veeam for AHV. I'd like to back up to cloud. If the building blows up, can I restore the backup to AHV once new hardware is up and running? So if you backed it up to the cloud, is it possible to bring it back down?
Absolutely. You would perform a staged restore in that scenario. You'd bring it back on-prem into a staging primary repository, and then, yes, you would be able to perform recovery, even granular recoveries from that state, but yes, you would then be able to recover it as an AHV VM.
Okay, very nice. And great to hear that you're using Veeam already, John. Appreciate that. Now's the time to get in your questions for Veeam. If you have any for Kevin, go ahead and use the questions box. Let's see, another question that came in. They're asking about Cloud Connect. Is Cloud Connect, is that included with Veeam Backup and Replication or the Universal License? Or is that a separate product?
Okay, it's a framework. Cloud Connect, if you're the service provider, is a way of easily serving out either a Veeam portion of a Veeam repository or a portion of hardware for replication to your clients. If you're the consumer of the service, so if you're an end user of Veeam, Cloud Connect from a licensing point of view is no extra. You would have a relationship with your local service provider, and they would bill you for the amount of repository storage you consume from them or the amount of replication hardware you consume from them. But from a Veeam licensing point of view, no additional licensing for the end user.
Got it. Okay, nice. Another question here, is there any way to do automated testing of the backup data with Veeam?
Absolutely. I touched on it very briefly within the session. We have a feature called Sure Backup. So that's all about automatic recovery verification. And that's about spinning workloads up, testing the virtual machine layer, the operating system layer. But as I mentioned, the real value is the application layer. So we can test that some table data exists in SQL. We can do a GET from a HTTP server, or whatever gives that green light of service, we can test for, then spin those back down again and move on to the next workloads. The beauty of Sure Backup is it doesn't require any additional storage to restore to because we're using the vPower streaming technology, and it doesn't require any time from an operative to actually do this because it's happening on a schedule, I mentioned, potentially when you're not around, and then you get a nice report that all your backups are 100% recoverable.
Very nice. Yeah, I like that. That's important. Another question came in. They're asking, can I back up data that's running in, or data that's stored in AWS or Azure?
Today, we can protect virtual machines in Azure and AWS. We would use our agent technology for this today, but there are solutions coming in the future without those agents.
Very nice, very nice. And then let's see, another question here. They're asking about containers. Is it possible to back up containers that are running on premises?
Excuse me. Today, we don't have any specific solution for containers. We can protect particular workloads, but from a containers point of view, we're sort of watching the industry, watching the space, seeing where it goes, and what it's doing, and then we're perhaps looking to include that in the future.
Got it. And then when it comes to the Cisco solution, where do people, if they have Cisco already, how is that supported? Is there joint support through Cisco and Veeam, or how does that work?
Absolutely. Yes, very specifically as well. If you're looking at the full Veeam availability on HyperFlex, that's completely supported by Cisco. Cisco have the ability to support Veeam using their Cisco TAC. So yes, it can be all taken care of by Cisco. If you already own Veeam licensing, then potentially there would be that split, but we play very nicely together from a support point of view.
Okay. And then another question that came in, they're asking, can Veeam back up physical servers?
Absolutely, yes. That would be another play for our agents. So traditionally, perhaps we're not known for that, but we've been able to protect physical workloads, physical servers. So, a traditional x86 server with Windows or Linux sat on there. Yes, we can take care of that.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions, Kevin, but it's been great having you on the event today. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and everyone have a great day.
And for more information about Veeam, of course, check out the handout that's available for download right there in your audience console. Also, like Kevin said, go to Veeam.com. It's got free 30-day trial of the entire Veeam availability suite. It's not locked down or limited. Use it for free for 30 days. Try it, see if you like it, and if it meets your data protection and disaster recovery needs. And now it's time for another prize giveaway before I introduce our next presenter on the event today. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Anthony Nguyen from California. Congratulations, Anthony Nguyen from California. And Regis Singh, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, from Kansas. Congratulations, Regis Singh from Kansas. You won one of the Microsoft Surface grand prizes. Stay tuned. We've got 3 more grand prizes and 3 more gift cards to give away still on today's event. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenters on the Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Megacast. You'll hear from Christophe Bertrand, Senior Analyst at ESG, and Manjul Shea, Director of Product Management at Nutanix. Take it away, Christophe.
Well, so here's the rhetorical question, which is, do you really need DR? And the answer is, well, yes, you do. And really, in DR, you have two words: disaster. That's not good, but recovery is really the best part. And at the end of the day, it's really about what you do, what you put in place, the topologies, the processes, the people, so that you can recover from any type of problem. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. So my name is Christophe Bertrand. I'm a senior analyst at ESG. I've been an analyst for a little over a year, and I was previously on the vendor side for many, many years in product and executive responsibilities focused on storage, backup and recovery, replication, disaster recovery, etc. So I've seen quite a bit of technology, and more importantly, talked to many customers along the way, and it's given me the ability to really get a lot of interesting experience and gain that experience, and then now apply it to research. So that's what we're going to do. Just want to give you a little bit of background on where the market's at and what's really happening around disaster recovery. So a few charts that will help us get there are about to appear. First of all, I think it's important to understand what we're dealing with. What we have as a consequence of a disaster or a downtime of an application or lost data, and these are kind of all the same, it's really the consequences that could affect a business and really change the perspective they have towards you. And this is all essentially created by a variety of sources and problems. I'm not going to go through all the things that could go wrong. The list is long, but what's more important is, what does it really do when you're down? As you can see, the issues are very clearly reported here by IT professionals. That's the people we surveyed. They're business issues. They are not necessarily technology issues at first. They're really about customer confidence, about money, about how the direct loss of revenue can be so dire that it affects the whole business in the end, simply because something has failed in IT and you have not been able to quickly get back on your feet. And of course, the other thing that's very interesting to me is the shock that it creates, the shock wave that it creates within the organization itself, with loss of employee confidence. If you work for an organization and somehow their systems are not performing or are essentially down, and that creates, I think, this reverberation across the organization that, hey, maybe we're not reliable as an organization. So it's very, very bad for morale. Of course, brand is affected. I'm sure you've all experienced as users the frustrations associated with not being able to complete a transaction because the system goes down, you're on a website, or you're at a retail store and something is wrong with the checkout systems. All of these are simple examples to just tell you, well, look, the research is here, the data is here. There are many exposures to losing data, many very negative consequences to the business and the organization at large. So as we think about this and sort of keep it in the back of our minds, we also asked, as part of the many surveys that we run, again, always targeting IT professionals, that's whom we work with and whom we survey, essentially how many times people had to invoke a disaster recovery process or use a secondary site in this case, and this was a question we asked about the previous year. They think about last year, how many times did you have to go to a secondary site? Typically, you use a secondary site when something really bad happens with a primary site, as you can imagine. And as you can see, the distribution is very interesting. It's going to happen to you, for sure, and it's probably going to happen to you more than once. And I think that's what this distribution shows you. By the way, we'll keep asking this question every 2 or 3 years to see how things evolve. Things are not going to get better. There are many reasons, again, why you may have to fail over to a secondary site, between ransomware attacks or just hardware issues or site issues, availability issues of the network potentially, and of course all of the issues associated with meteorological type of problems, hurricanes, etc. And sometimes it forces you to shut down your data center. Just to think about that, think about the frequency here that has been reported, and you realize that, well, not only it's going to happen to me. But we've just seen it has a pretty bad effect if I'm down, if I can't get back on my feet quickly. So, we've also looked at what's going on with cloud. It's clearly a very important topic, and cloud is actually seen as a very positive, having a very positive impact on the space of data protection. And I think, as you can see from this pretty clear picture here, is most of our respondents, 87% of them actually, do believe that cloud is part of the answer when it comes to having a successful data protection strategy. So something to bear in mind. Also, something that's interesting here is the fact that cloud-based VMs and applications are perceived to be more resilient. There are many reasons for that, I think. For me, I would suggest here that obviously when you think about the hosters and the service organizations that are providing those capabilities, the ability to host VMs or deliver a service based on VMs, obviously they've made investments in technology and infrastructure that allow them to be extremely resilient. And I think that sort of permeates and reflects very positively on their service and is creating this feedback and this perception. So I don't want to spend too much time on research and numbers because we actually have a great solution to talk about today. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to Manjul for his part of the presentation.
Thank you, Christophe. I think that was a great introduction and hopefully helps audience kind of figure out how disaster recovery is a key aspect for their IT strategy. So now that we had kind of got an overview of why disaster recovery or a BCDR plan is important, I would like to showcase to you how Zyleap from Nutanix is a true cloud DR service and would essentially check various boxes and come up with a better BCDR strategy or a posture for your company. So the idea of Zyleap is pretty simple. You have Nutanix running on-prem in your own environment. It could be running VMware ESX on Nutanix. It could be running HP Nutanix. Either is fine. And the data is continuously replicated or protected to XyCloud, which are essentially data centers run and operated by Nutanix. So the data is continuously replicated. If something happens to your environment, could be a planned one, could be an unplanned one, you just bring up those applications and VMs on Xy, and then it's business as usual for your end users. So what we achieve by the Zyleap service is you eliminate the need for dedicated disaster recovery site. So I've had the opportunity to talk to maybe 100 plus customers over the last few months, and the one common ask one common trend I see among customers is, how do I consolidate my data centers? And in particular, if there's a disaster recovery data center, can I get out of running and managing that business? And Zyleap enables you to do that. It's a true subscription service, which is managed from Prism, the Nutanix management console. So one single console to manage your primary workload as well as disaster recovery. And then, if you have heard of or you're familiar with Nutanix one-click simplicity, which we have brought into the private cloud environment, you will see the same one-click simplicity in disaster recovery, in doing failover and in doing testing. Now, when I do a demo a couple of minutes down the line, you can see for yourself how simple and easy it is to use Zyleap service. So when I talk to customers, the key message I want to share with is the key differentiation is Zyleap makes disaster recovery simple, easy. If you ask yourself or many of your other peers, the most common reason to not do DR or to have a DR but which is not useful is it's very difficult to test it, very difficult to operate or set it up. I think what we have achieved with Zyleap is get rid of all those problems and make it really easy for you to try it out and work with that. So this is built in. Which means you don't require any separate software or virtual appliance. It's built into Nutanix AOS software. When you upgrade to Nutanix AOS, you get additional DR functionalities. It is simple and easy. Simple production policies, simple recovery plans to get it set up. And all of it can be done with a one-click test and failover from Prism, which is a Nutanix management console. So again, I'll show you a demo, but I think the key idea is Zyleap makes DR simple and easy, which implies that you have a much higher probability of, getting your business back on its footing as soon as possible once a disaster has really happened. The other key advantage for Zyleap is it lowers the total cost of ownership. So I'm sure many of you have done business TCO analysis about what does it cost for me to set up a disaster recovery site. And if you compare setting up a second DR site with, let's say, Nutanix and third-party software and hypervisor, compared to that, or even compared to setting up disaster recovery, a second site with Nutanix and AHV, Zyleap will come out to be considerably lower cost. We have great sales team who would be very happy to work with you to show how these numbers work for your exact scenario. And the reason we can offer a lower total cost of ownership is by taking out some of those costs and offering the economies of scale of cloud, built-in free VPN, firewall, DDoS, these kind of features. So simple and easy to use, lower total cost of ownership. Those are the two reasons you may want to consider Zyleap Cloud DR Service. Now, all of these benefits and differentiations essentially come down from the way we have architected Zyleap. I think that's the secret sauce behind it. And that secret sauce is Zyleap is nothing but Nutanix architecture, Nutanix software running on data centers which are operated and managed by Nutanix. So the same exact architecture, what you have in your environment, is what we run and operate. And by having the same architecture on both sides, we can really make it work simple and easy. At the same time, we have been doing disaster recovery for many years. We have thousands of customers who have used this. So the feature set is pretty mature and rich. So if you consider a typical disaster recovery life cycle as a customer, you would go through 3 stages: planning and onboarding, testing it frequently, hopefully once every quarter at least, and then finally failing over and fail back when you need to. So in each of those areas, the Zyleap service is pretty mature. So the storage replication technology is the same as what we have been using for many years. Thousands of customers use it in production, battle tested. You could bring your own VPN, and we support all the important players: Palo Alto, Cisco, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Juniper, or you can use Nutanix VPN, or you can use Direct Connect, which is great for low latency, high bandwidth connectivity. We offer or let you test your DR system as frequently as you need it. You can do it once every quarter if that's what you need, or even faster than that. We also offer SLAs on both RPO and RTO. So this is again uniquely different because it's a cloud service. We offer you SLA and back it with financial guarantees. So if for any reason the RPOs and RTO are not met because of a Nutanix problem, we will back it up with financial penalties on Nutanix side. That's a real big difference. I encourage you, go and ask some of the other DR options you're looking at and ask those vendors, are you offering me an SLA on both RPO and RTO? And most likely the answer here is no, unlike Zyleap. It's about failover and failback, one-click simplicity, very easy to do. And the other big thing is Xi implements a full software-defined networking. So you can preserve your VM's IP addresses when they fail over to Xi. Now this is really big for many customers. Having your VM's IP address come up as is means you do not have to muck around with IP addresses and re-IPing and hope that the application works when they really fail over. Now, I guess the most exciting feature for Zyleap is that it's a true cloud service. I mean, there's a real distinction between a software and a service, and some of that comes out in the way we run and manage it. So let me share 2 data points. In the last 90 days, for our Zyleap service, which we are running in US, we would have done about 370 software upgrades. And every day, about 900 VMs fail over in our canary accounts. So we have in these accounts, VMs replicating data to Xi. They are failed over, left it running for some time, and then shut it down, fail it back. And this keeps on happening in loop, one after another, again and again. And why we do this is, if there's any problem in the environment, we find it first and make sure that you never experience it. That's the beauty of running a cloud service. We can do a lot of these things on our own to make sure that the service SLAs are met, and when you really need a disaster recovery to happen or work for you, it does and does not get, into problems because of some things which were not kind of checked upon. That's the real advantage in my view, or the real benefit of having a true cloud service. And this is what customers find, very beneficial or useful. So very recently, I've had the opportunity where a customer made some changes to their VPN connectivity on their on-prem environment. Because of it, their replication to Xyleap broke down. We found this in our alerts, and we reached back to the customer and said, hey, it looks like something has changed your environment. Do you want to look at it and see if you can fix it back? And the customer came back and said, thank you for the message. It's really gratifying to know that you are watching the environment as closely as you are. What's the best way then kind of show it to you? I mean, let's see a real live demo of the Xyleap service for ourselves. So let me switch to sharing my screen. So this is the Xyleap service, and this is the live service. So I'm going to log into the service. It's running in our US East Ashburn data center, as you can see in the URL. So I log into the service. It's the same Prism interface which you have seen and you're familiar with. And let me show to you two things. One, how easy is it to these some of the key features of Xyleap service, and then show to you the one-click failover capability which I was talking about. So if you're setting up disaster recovery with Xyleap, it is nothing but a three-step process. Step one is set up your on-prem Prism Central to Xyleap network connectivity, VPN or direct connect. And I'm not going to show that because it depends on Palo Alto, Fortinet, whatever you're using. But once that step is done, the setting up the actual DR is literally two steps. Step one, create a protection policy where you essentially give it a name to the policy. So let's say my business critical app protection on the location where you want these VMs to be protected. What's the RPO you want? So you want the snapshots to be taken every hour, every 3 hours. Choose that frequency. How many snapshots you want to have? So this is a look back period. How many hours or how many days can you go back in case you have to do a failover? If these are app consistent recovery points, you can do that as well. And then you simply select the VMs you want to protect. So Nutanix offers this great option of using categories where you can essentially put VMs in categories and say all the VMs in this category need to be protected. The advantage of that is tomorrow if you add a new VM, it will simply be protected as soon as it's added to the right category. So this is it. This is one single screen with a couple of options. And as soon as I've done that, my replication of these VMs to Xyleap will start. The final step of setting up the Xyleap DR is creating a recovery plan. So this is how you can bring back your whole environment, let's say when you do a failover. Again, give it a name. Let's say my Biz App Recovery Plan. I think that's the real benefit which customers get with having a cloud service. To be brought up in great. Now that I've talked about the service, customer environments, databases are the ones which should usually be brought up first. So let's say I want to bring up on my, database VMs first. After that, I want to have a delay of 5 minutes for the database VMs to be up and running and be properly configured. And then I want to bring up, let's say, all the favorite VMs of my employee payroll category. As easy as that. And when you do a recovery failover, it will exactly execute in the same sequence. You can also insert scripts soon enough, which will allow you to even do some custom configuration if that's required. And final step is, what's the network configuration? Like I mentioned, Xy has full software-defined networking, allowing you to do testing in a network bubble. And you could decide what's the network you want these to be done. The subnet range and IP range, all of that, you can do it. If any of your VMs require a public IP so that they're accessible over the internet, you could do that as well. So all this configuration you can write to from this one single screen. And in fact, if you don't provide, for example, a screen for test failover, that will be automatically created on the Xy side when you initiate a failover. So this is as simple as that. 2 screens here and a single screen for production policy, and your Xyleap disaster recovery is set up and running. As simple as that. And you do all of this from within Nutanix Prism, the same exact console which you use for managing your production VM workloads. No need to go to a separate third-party console, third-party software, third-party cloud provider console, none of that. All right from Prism, one single management console for your primary and DR. Now let's say now everything is going great, your DR is set up, running, and maybe you have a system, maintenance event, or maybe you have let's say a real disaster and you want to fail over. What do? Log into Xi, just like the way I did, come to this same screen, select the recovery plan which we created, and this is your one-click failover and test menu. Simply select the recovery plan, click on the test, click on the failover, and your failover will start. So in this case, it shows me primary location on-prem, the target location Xi, and I can do an unplanned or a planned failover. Planned failover is the most common, which is where is the 95% scenario. Unplanned is, for example, let's say you didn't know and for some reason your on-prem environment is not available. In that case, you can recover from the latest point or some other point in the past. And after that, you simply click failover. Once you do that, the failover will start. You click on the failover. You will see a history of all failovers, including the current one which have been executed. And click on any of the failover and it will give you all the details, creating subnet, migrating VMs, powering on the VMs. One by one, all of the details are available. So any point of time, you can go back and see how the whole thing really worked out. So this is really as simple as that. This is that one-click menu, one-click test failover, one-click failover I was talking about. As simple as select the recovery plan and execute the failover. And this is the beauty of Xi for the simplicity and ease of use. Oops. Great. I think with this, I am done with this part of the presentation. Hopefully, you had the opportunity to look at the simplicity and ease of use of Xi service.
All right, great demo there by Manjula. We got a lot of great feedback that people really enjoyed seeing the products in action. Another comment just came in, live demo is awesome. I totally agree. I'm a visual person myself. I want to see it. So I'm going to pass that along to all of our presenters on future events. So thank you for that feedback. Glad that you enjoyed that demo. I do have a poll question up on the screen right now that just says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? So just make your selection there. There are multiple options. You can select more than one. And while I'll just leave that poll up there while I announce our prize winner. Actually, two prize winners. All right, so we have an Amazon $500 gift card that is going out to Michael Dees from Tennessee. Congratulations, Michael Dees from Tennessee. You won an Amazon $500 gift card. And then another awesome Surface Pro we have going to Nick Gall from Oregon. Congratulations, Nick Gall from Oregon. Stay tuned. We've got two more grand prizes and two more gift cards to give away still on the event. So lots of prizes to keep watching out for. All right, so thank you everyone who answered that poll question. We do appreciate it. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Megacast. That is Sandro Lima, Director of Technical Business Development at DataCore. Sandro, thanks for being on the event today.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. Always enjoy learning more about what you all are doing at DataCore. I have a poll question up on the screen for the audience, and I want to call everyone's attention to that. The question is, do you have an active or upcoming storage project in the next 12 months? We'll just leave that up on the screen. And Sandro, looks like you've got some good slides for us here today.
Yep.
All right, well, let's just give this poll just a few more seconds. I appreciate everyone answering that. All right, good. I appreciate those responses. Thank you, everyone. Looks like we've got a good portion of the audience. We do appreciate it. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sandro. Take it away.
Thanks again, David. And my name is Sandro Lima. I'm Director of Technical Business Development at DataCore Software. So today we're going to talk about how DataCore can help you accommodate a diverse data set on your business continuity practices. So we have some good content here, so let's jump right into it. All right. So there's no point in emphasizing how important and critical data is, right? But what happens is that you cannot treat all data equal and with equal importance in your business continuity and disaster recovery plans. So what we need to do is understand what is the potential impact and the risks associated with each data set, so to provide the appropriate levels of protection to each one of them. And from a data store perspective, the only way you can do that is having a wide range of capabilities that can give you this appropriate data protections, right, depending on the RTO and RPO requirements of your data. I'm going to give further details on each one of this or some of these capabilities further, but now I just want to highlight some of the challenges that you may face when you try to implement this wide range of capabilities across your entire storage infrastructure. So the first one, and very common, is having multiple storage vendors. So it's not uncommon for a company to have 2 or more different storage array vendors. And what happens is that each one of them has different capabilities, and most of the time they don't talk to each other. So what happens is that even when they can provide the same capability. For example, in this example, imagine that you have vendor 1, 2, and 3. They all offer snapshot, for example. And even then, they have different configuration, different interfaces, and you end up having to create 3 different processes and treat them separately in your BCDR plan. So just adds complexity. So a second challenge, very common as well, is different storage models. So you have companies with leveraging traditional storage arrays connected through SAN, storage area network. You have some companies that are more on a converged model, leveraging direct attach and internal storage. Some companies doing hyperconverged for very small footprint, simple deployment. But what we see very frequently across our customer base is a hybrid scenario where companies have all sorts of different models, and including cloud for some archival or disaster recovery. So combining different storage vendors with different storage models, then you can see how this becomes really complex for you to basically deploy all these capabilities across all your storage infrastructure. But it doesn't end up there. So even if you lay out a well-designed, well-tested BCDR plan, what happens is that your environment is always changing. So throughout the lifetime of your data center, you have technology refresh, right? So you bring in new vendors, new architectures, new technologies. You have to deal with mergers and acquisitions, and then you have to accommodate and ingest other vendors, architectures, personal procedures, and everything. You can have data center changes, so either like a physical move or an expansion. Maybe your company wants to leverage cloud more aggressively for replication, for disaster recovery. So, and this list just goes on and on, right? So point here is things are changing all the time, and your BCDR plans needs to be flexible enough to accommodate these changes over time. All right, so with this scenario, so we have different vendors, different storage models, and an ever-changing environment. So how can we still accomplish our goal of having this wide range of capabilities consistently available across your entire storage infrastructure. So Data Core, so we believe that it all starts with having a very comprehensive set of advanced services delivered through a single platform. And this is exactly what Data Core delivers, right? So we have synchronous mirroring, asynchronous replication, continuous data protection that we're going to talk in a minute, snapshots, and a lot more of this enterprise-grade data services that can be deployed across your storage infrastructure in a very consistent way. And with this platform, you can integrate and ingest any sort of storage, direct connect, SAN. So you can see at the bottom, so we have iSCSI, Fiber Channel, NVMe, direct attached cloud, right? And on the top, where you see the consumers, so we can serve this storage to different host types, so from physical servers to hypervisors to virtual machines and containers. So that's the first step, having this wide range of data services available through a single platform. A second step, and as important as the first one, is a deployment model. And this is where being soft-defined really enables Data Core to be deployed on any model. So you can deploy Data Core as storage controllers for primary and secondary storage on a hyperconverged scenario. You can install it on the cloud, on a disaster recovery site. So it doesn't matter what kind of model we have today or you plan to have in the future. So we'll be able to accommodate, and any vendor that you have now or in the future, you'll be able to accommodate that with Data Core. And now you can see a picture of what I was drawing. So basically having this consistent set of wide services across your entire data center. So you probably can see now how it can simplify your processes and the design of your business continuity and disaster recovery plans. So next, let's talk about a bit more in detail about some of these capabilities, right? So the first one is when you're talking about data, that is very critical, right? So we're talking about RTO in the range of microseconds to milliseconds and zero RPO. So it means that you can't have like any data loss and you have uninterrupted data access. So for these situations, synchronous mirroring and auto failover is king, right? So just talking a little bit more about it. So synchronous mirroring allow you to have two copies of the data on two nodes acting as one. So as soon as one becomes unavailable, the second one is ready to become primary and avoiding any data interruption. And system makes sure that these data are kept in sync all the time. So this diagram illustrates how this works. So very simple. We have two nodes, three hosts on the top. Imagine that you have two disks being served. So VD1, for example, on the left-hand side is served primarily by node 1 and having node 2 as secondary. So they're both active and in sync. So whenever node 1 becomes unavailable, so node 2 can pick up, and the host, we see no interruption on his data access. So another example of synchronous mirroring is what we call stretched or metro clusters. So it's basically you have these two nodes not on the same place, but several miles apart in different locations. Still, so as long as you have a low latency link connecting both, you can have all benefits of synchronous mirroring. So no data loss, no data interruption, but with an added redundancy, because being on separate locations mean that you have independent power sources, independent cooling. So benefits of synchronous mirroring with added redundancy. So that would be a second scenario. So synchronous mirroring with auto failover will be ideal for your most critical data that needs to be available all the time and accept no data loss. Third example would be having a third copy of your data. So in this case, you have your two nodes on an HA fashion, and then you can have a third copy of the data, but this will be on a standby fashion, right? So this becomes very handy whenever you have to take one node out for maintenance, for example, but your data is so critical that you can't lose the HA access to your data. So what you can do in this case is you bring down node 1 for maintenance, for example, and node 3 can be manually brought up, and then it will be an HA pair for node 2. When node 1 is back, you just like fail back to node 1 and everything goes back to normal. So this gives you the flexibility of doing these maintenance windows without affecting your HA for your data. All right, moving on. So second model is when your RTO are in the range of seconds to minutes, but you still have strict RPOs. So in this case, asynchronous replication will be a good fit. So just to explain a little bit more of what synchronous replication is the ability for you to have the primary disk is streaming all the changes across network for a remote location, right? So this picture here illustrates the most common scenario for synchronous replication. This is to build DR sites. So you see on the left, you have two nodes in an HA fashion, so synchronous mirroring between them, so HA, and all the changes are asynchronous replicated to the DR site. And whenever something happens with the primary data center, so the second copy of the DR site, you can bring it up, and then you can recover from there. Another example, very common as well, of using replication is to use for secondary storage. So sometimes you want to have a separate copy of your data, but you don't want to store this on your fast and expensive primary storage. So you can use asynchronous replication to basically stream all these changes to a secondary, slower but more cheaper storage. All right, so moving on, our third case is when you have RTOs between minutes and hours to even days, right? And in this case, snapshots and backups are commonplace. So, but a particular case is when you still want these not so strict RTOs, but you have very strict RPOs. And in this case, CDP, that stands for Continuous Data Protection, can be a really good fit. So let me explain a little bit more about CDP. So CDP allows you to have a constant recording and log of all the changes that happens in your disk. So a common analogy that we make is with DVR, so digital video recorder. So imagine that you are recording everything that is going on live, and you are able to rewind to any point in time and create an image at this point. So a very interesting example, and is becoming more and more popular, unfortunately, is a protection against ransomware. So imagine that, so CDP allows you to protect these critical disks, and if there is a ransomware outbreak, you can basically rewind to the to the exact second before the event and be able to recover from there. So we basically have near to zero data loss and can recover very quickly. Another thing that we see customers doing is not only creating an image for the recovery, but also creating other images over time to basically for forensics and analysis, basically investigation and trying to understand how the infection took place in the first place. But that's not the only use case for CDP. We also have, for example, protection against accidental deletion of files as well. All right, and the last one is snapshots. So snapshots, pretty common, so everybody knows snapshots. So it allows you to capture this point-in-time image of your disk. So, but there are some added benefits when you take snapshots with DataCore. So the first benefit is that you're doing it at the storage level. So you can take snapshots at the host level, but this depends on host software, and it takes resources out of the host, right? So doing it at the storage level, you can do it completely transparent for the host. So that's the first one. So the second one is that DataCore gives you the ability to create differential snapshots. These are very lightweight snapshots that you can take. So if you want to take snapshots very frequently, so these differential snapshots are a good option. And third, if you want a full snapshot or a full copy or image of the disk, you can also do that. And DataCore offers you the ability to store the snapshot on any other storage. So you don't need to, for example, if you're taking a snapshot of your very hot data, you don't need to store that and consume resources on this fast and expensive storage. So you can move it to another storage that can be on another vendor, so you store the snapshots there. So this is what I have for today. So if you're interested in learning more, we have a business continuity page on our website, so with lots of resources. And also want to emphasize that in addition to these few capabilities that we covered today, there's a lot more, especially on the performance and efficiency arena. So head to our DataCore website and look for this link, and you're going to see like explanations and details on all features of DataCore. All right, so as always, please feel free to reach us if you have any questions or want to learn more. And just want to open the floor for any questions that the audience may have.
Absolutely, yeah, great presentation, Sandro. I love all the architectural diagrams there. Really cool stuff, and also the spectrum from, just traditional backup all the way up to continuous availability. We do have some questions here. The first one, Teresa is asking, what's the maximum distance between the buildings and nodes for synchronous mirroring?
It depends more on the round-robin latency of the link. So we try to stay below 5 milliseconds to not affect applications. And imagine that in a dedicated link, it can stretch from few dozen miles apart.
Okay, nice. Another question Marcus is asking, and you may have covered this, if we synchronize the data with automatic replication and we get a ransomware infection, wouldn't that just replicate it to the mirror side and then we'd have both sides infected? What's the recommendation on that?
That's correct. So asynchronous replication will basically encrypt the replica as well. So that's why we suggest for ransomware CDP. So CDP constantly records all the changes to the disk and allows you to go back in the exact point in time that you want with like second granularity, right? So you're able not to, and then you create the images from there very quickly, and you're not like limited to one point in time. You can create as many images that you want on any point in time covered by CDP. So you can configure how much CDP or for how long it will be storing data, right? But within this window, you can go back at any point in time with second granularity and create images very fast and in a very simple way, right? So that's why it's not only used for recovery, but it's also a great tool for forensics and investigation, just because you can go back and forth and understand exactly, take an image of the disk and understand exactly what happened at that point.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's important, especially for ransomware. Very cool. Okay, let's see. Another question here they're asking, can I have more than 2 nodes when I do synchronous mirroring?
Absolutely. So if you need more horsepower, so you can add more nodes, we work on an N+1 fashion. So as long as you have like a second node for your replica, if you really want that HA for your hot and critical data. So, but you can have as many nodes as you want.
Oh, nice. That's cool. Another question, what about licensing? How does DataCore license this?
So our licensing model is very simple. So we basically have 3 models: enterprise, standard, and long-term storage. So the first 2, the difference between them is fiber channel. So if you want fiber channel, you go with enterprise. If you don't care about fiber channel, you're only using SCSI, so you can go with standard. And then they're all priced by capacity. So more capacity, and then you have like different tiers, and the price changes as you add more capacity. So it becomes cheaper on a per terabyte, become cheaper per terabyte as you grow in capacity.
Got it. And just to clarify, is DataCore, do you all sell hardware, or do I buy the software and put it on my own hardware? How does that work?
So all the above. So we're mostly a software company, but we do offer an appliance in case you want that simplicity of deployment, right? So that's an option as well. So you can buy as just software, or you can buy our appliance as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah, we've got all kinds of flexibility there. Another question, with CDP, how long do I store my data in CDP? I think is the question here. And then how granular is CDP?
Yeah, so it's completely configurable. So you can define how much storage space you want for CDP, right? And in terms of granularity, so it's second granularity. So it's like it has a point in time for every change in your disk. So you can go to the exact point in time that you want.
Oh, nice. Okay. And then how do you recommend people get started with DataCore? What's the best way?
So I think just heading to our website, we have several videos. And we also have some free training there. So I think, best place to start is over there. And then go to our resources pages, and there's a lot of material there for you to get started.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that's all the questions we have and all the time we have for our live Q&A session, but a really great presentation, Sandro. Thank you for being on the event today.
Appreciate, David. Thank you.
For more information on DataCore, check out the handout that's available for download right there in the audience console. And as Sandro said, visit datacore.com, check out videos, and sign up for a demonstration. Give it a try for yourself. And now it is time for our next set of prize winners on the event today. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to William Jaeger from Texas. Congratulations, William Jaeger from Texas. And we have another grand prize going to Brian Godralt. Godralt from Connecticut. Brian, spelled Gaudrealt. I apologize if I mispronounced it. I will post all the prize winners in the chat. Congratulations to William of Texas and Brian of Connecticut. We have more prizes, so stay tuned for that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Adam Margette, Technical Specialist at You&rsquo. Adam, thanks for being on the event.
Hey, David, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to have you on the event again. Take it away, Adam.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here. We really appreciate the opportunity. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where it is you are joining us from. As David had mentioned, my name is Adam Margette. I'm a technical specialist here with You&rsquo, and I will be kind of taking you through our portion of the data protection DRaaS Megacast here. Now, before we talk about You&rsquo as a company or some of the solutions that we provide, I think it's important, and I'm sure other folks have touched on, kind of the problem at hand. And over 30 years of experience in the backup and DR industry, we're constantly facing a myriad of threats and challenges that can threaten our day-to-day operations, and those certainly come as a cost as we're increasingly monetizing our data, driving additional value around that data. It's really probably the second most valuable or the most important asset that an organization has behind the people and the employees that are really driving that organization forward. The estimate that you're looking at here is what Gartner estimates the impact of a unplanned data center outage or unplanned system downtime. And whether you feel that your organization transacts at a level that's significantly higher than $9,000 per minute, maybe a level that's lower if you're with a nonprofit or a government entity, you may feel that you're transacting a little bit lower than $9,000 per minute. I think that we can all agree as IT professionals that the service availability goals that are being demanded of us from the business units that we serve are increasingly tightening. And with that as well, we're facing more risk really in this landscape than ever before. But in this figure as well, it's not just an organization's ability or inability to transact when systems go down, but we're also taking into account the cost of employee productivity. If the systems or the applications that they depend on in their day-to-day are unavailable to them, the potential cost of recovery here as well. And when we talk about the cost of recovery, a lot of the more severe and the events that we really need to respond to significantly are a lot of those headline-grabbing incidents, fire, flood, a ransomware attack or a malware attack. But while those are certainly the most severe, they're much less frequent than some of the incidents that we see that could disrupt day-to-day operations locally, things like human error and software issues. So I think that it's important to recognize that we are working within a spectrum here and a spectrum of severity. And at You&rsquo, as I'm going to share with everyone, it's our goal to equip our users with the ability to readily respond to any of these incidents and perform recoveries as necessary, whether they need to restore granular items, just individual files and folders, recover guests, applications, clients, or their entire site. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I wanted to tell everyone a little bit about the company. And I did tease this earlier. We've been in this space for a while, originally founded in 1989, protecting Unix systems. But now today, 3 decades of work in building what is now You&rsquo. Over 30,000 customers across the globe trust us for their data protection and disaster recovery needs. With a combination of our hardware and our software solutions, we're protecting over 2 exabytes of customer data. And with the You&rsquo Cloud, a proprietary manufacturer's managed solution, we are not AWS, we are not leveraging infrastructure within Azure. We're protecting over 100 petabytes of cloud data within those environments. We're going to talk more closely about the You&rsquo Cloud in just a bit. I do want to call out our customer support organization. They're critically important. They're the absolute pulse of our organization, and they do a fantastic job supporting our clients around the globe here. It's something that we place a tremendous amount of investment, visibility, and pride in. They are based here in the United States, down in South Carolina, and they're available to our community 24/7 by 365. 8x5 support in the disaster recovery space, we realized a few years ago, just wasn't cutting it. So everyone has access to a 24/7 support organization. You can see down the bottom there a couple of the Stevie Awards that we've won year over year. We were winners in 2018 as well for that customer service and that customer support org. Again, they do an absolutely fantastic job. When it comes to our solution and how we can enable our customers, we're striving to deliver an all-in-one experience. In a lot of cases, we've worked with folks that have kind of Frankenstein solutions together. As the environment continues to grow or get increasingly complex, they've ended up with a different or a bunch of siloed pieces all trying to accomplish that overall stance of business continuity. With Unitrends, it's going to start with local backup and recovery, where we can protect over 250 operating systems, applications, and hypervisors. So not only do I mean all-in-one from a business continuity perspective, but from the local environment as well. You don't need separate products to manage your physical tenants, your virtual machines, storage objects, applications. Unitrends can protect it all. There's flexibility for our users and how they can choose to deploy the solution. The Recovery Series is our line of purpose-built hardware appliances. These appliances come pre-tuned with the backup software installed, as well as the compute memory and storage resources to orchestrate local backup and recovery needs. Now, when we say all-in-one as far as this appliance, there's no need to add in secondary storage, a device for deduplication. All of your data reduction is included. Those engines are included on the appliance. Your reporting functionality is built in as well, so you don't need to stand up a proxy or back end your own SQL database into our solution. It's ready to go. You rack it, stack it, give it an IP, and you're ready to start protecting assets in your environment. If you're looking to leverage existing compute and storage resources, you can deploy our software as a virtual appliance on top of your favorite hypervisor, whether that's VMware, Hyper-V, Zen, or Nutanix AHV. We can integrate and talk to the APIs of all of the above. So locally, you have the ability with our appliances to protect and recover individual items, virtual machines, file-level backups, application data, transaction logs, and so forth. But it's critically important to get that data off-site. What's really powering off-site recovery for us here at Unitrends is replication to what we would call the hot target, and that's another Unitrends appliance. You can, with our solution, still archive data off to removable media such as disk or tape. You can write backup copies to a secondary storage device, whether it's a NAS device through CIFS or NFS, or a SAN device through Fiber Channel or iSCSI. But the disadvantage to that cold media is that the backups have to be re-imported to a Unitrends appliance before they can be recovered, so you have a two-step restore process. When replicating to the hot target or another appliance, those backups are immediately available for recovery. Again, there's flexibility here. You can configure these in a site-to-site methodology. If you've got multiple locations or campuses throughout your organization, deploy our hardware or software and replicate to hardware or software. You can mix and match what those targets look like depending on the infrastructure and the needs available at that secondary site. You can also, for organizations that are looking to leverage or already have footprints existing in public cloud environments, you can deploy our software through the AWS or the Azure marketplaces, both as a replication target and to protect cloud-based instances. Now, the Unitrends Cloud presents an option here as well. Again, we are not a public cloud environment, but we do have a cloud solution that has been designed for only two purposes. The first being long-term data retention and management, and our white glove disaster recovery as a service. Now, while we are not a security company, we can augment and help customers kind of strengthen their existing cybersecurity posture when it comes to threats such as ransomware. I think that it's a really significant threat, and we can augment. We're not going to replace your traditional AV firewalls, even that user awareness, that phishing training. We've seen a tremendous amount of social engineering being leveraged to drive these attacks now. But there is some hardening that's been developed within our platform to make that backup environment more robust. It starts with prevention. Unitrends appliances operate on a hardened CentOS kernel. The majority of ransomware binary that is out there is targeting Windows-based systems and Windows-based file extensions. That's not to say that they're not going after Mac OS or Linux, but the addressable install marketplaces are so significantly smaller, they're typically investing their time and their energy in writing code to go after Windows. But it doesn't just stop there. Linux is a little bit more flexible in how you can build out and architect those storage partitions. So as we have architected the partitions in which we are landing the backups, it is an immutable zone. It is read-only. So you've got Linux file extensions in a Linux read-only repository. Even if we did back up an infected client, that Windows binary is not going to be executing against other backups or other files in that repo. Now, on the front end, we have a machine learning algorithm that every appliance that Unitrends deploys is equipped with. And what this algorithm does is establish baseline patterns of behavior for the clients in your environment that we're backing up or protecting. Now, we're not just looking at things like rates of change, but as we've worked and helped customers recover from ransomware attacks, we've noticed that it leaves traces, increased or changing density of files, high Shannon entropy, or the overall randomness of the data as that encryption is going off and kind of scrambling the data. There are other signs. So in addition to rates of change, we're looking at a few other characteristics to identify potentially anomalous activity. If those baseline patterns are broken, it triggers an alert both through our appliance dashboard. You can configure these to be emailed out. You can capture SMNT. Sorry, I always struggle with that acronym when I'm talking fast. Trap notifications here as well, SMTP. You guys get the idea here. Trap notifications as well, so that you're alerted to that anomalous behavior. You're able to investigate, quarantine the machine, start to review logs and other messages to see, okay, is this the only infected client? Is this our patient 0? You quarantine the infection, wipe those machines, and then you leverage our built-in recovery testing. It is application-level recovery testing. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well, to identify clean, usable points of restore. One such customer of ours, a little story that I'd like to share with folks, that successfully recovered is EXCO Engineering. You can read the full case study on unitrends.com by searching for EXCO, but they're a sheet metal and a machine component manufacturer up in Toronto, Canada. They're making metal equipment and die-cast tools for use in the automotive industry. Really key to their manufacturing operations was a main file server that was on the served the manufacturing floor, and prior to using Unitrends, they were just rotating LTO tapes off-site, but this server had continued to grow in size as the business had grown. They'd made some acquisitions. They had over 2 million individual files on this machine, and a full backup was taking 72-plus hours to write to those tapes. So they were looking for a faster, more efficient way to do things. They opted to deploy Unitrends physical appliances. Instead of still writing off to tape, they opted to write to disk, a little bit faster, a little bit more reliable. They also replicated some data to the Unitrends cloud and enrolled some mission-critical machines in our disaster recovery as a service. So there were some benefits locally. They were able to achieve the Sarbanes-Oxley compliance that they were looking for. They were able to streamline that data center footprint, eliminate the need for that tape library, some of that legacy equipment. About 6 months after deploying Unitrends, that main file server was hit with a crypto virus. They were alerted to the infection, able to quarantine, wipe that machine. They used a tested backup off of their appliance to identify a clean point of restore. They were able to rebuild and restore that server in under a day, about 18 hours following that attack. So I think a really nice study, and you can check out more of the story there on our website with the full case study being available for folks. Just one example here of customers that we've helped. So when we look at the topology and, again, how we would deploy, we've kind of talked about this. You've seen the pillars here. But, again, it's going to start by deploying either our physical or virtual appliance in your data center to protect your physical workloads, virtual machines, NAS devices, and applications. We want to get that data off-site. You can do so by creating a backup copy to what we would consider that archive target. Again, removable disk, tape, a NAS device, SAN, even public cloud. You can archive into cheap and deep storage with AWS, Google, Rackspace, or you can, or I should say, you can replicate that data to the hot recovery site where it's available for recovery. And again, the hot site is either another Unitrends appliance or the Unitrends cloud. Now, for our customers, they've seen some benefits. And again, it is a cloud environment that is not within the public clouds. We're managing that back-end environment for our customers. And for our users, about 1 in 3 Unitrends customers is subscribed to our cloud service today. It's been a predictable year-over-year pricing model. them being hands-off with managing that back-end environment, and there are no fees for egress or data retrieval. I think that's critically important because the majority of folks that are still landing data in cloud, offsite storage, in a cloud environment are still pulling that back. We conduct a state of data protection and disaster recovery survey. It had over 800 respondents, a mix of industry verticals and organizations of different sizes. 60% of our respondents, and these are not all Unitrends customers, but folks that have found their way to the survey, whether it be through Spiceworks or other avenues, certainly some folks from our community, but 60% of those 800 respondents that were leveraging cloud storage had to make a retrieval, and another 15% of those folks had to make 5 or more retrievals in the last year, and that's in a lot of cases where the costs will compile with that public cloud infrastructure is when you're getting into those retrievals. There are no egress fees with Unitrends. You can view all of your available recovery points right from your local interface, immediately mount a share in the cloud environment to recover granular items, or import the entire backup group to your local appliance to initiate restore of a system. When it comes to licensing out the cloud, again, we want to make it very straightforward for our customers. Some of the burden, or one of the challenges in adopting cloud in some cases, is a lack of internal expertise, or smaller organizations don't have maybe the bandwidth to really do the research and dig into what exactly are we getting. So we want to make it very straightforward for customers that are interested in evaluating our cloud. We're only interested in that long-term retention. Well, how much data are you going to send to Unitrends? We license that capacity in 500 gigabyte increments. So we're looking at the local footprint before any data reduction and what's going to be sent to Unitrends. On top of capacity, you will license out for the retention. We offer a number of different retention windows, 90 days, 1 to 7 years, even infinite retention, and we store the backup copies for you on a grandfather, father-son rotation. So once that retention has been built, you'll have access to your most recent 7 daily backups and the most recent successful backup and group from each of the last 4 weeks, 12 months, and the subscribed number of years. Now, recovery in the cloud, in the Unitrends cloud environment, is where you would leverage our disaster recovery as a service. When we talk about this service, we call it white glove. Think, fancy restaurant. They're bringing you the warm towel in between meals. They're bringing you sorbet to clear your palate. Very, very hands-off for the user, and you've got a kind of full service experience that's being brought to you. That's what our DRaaS is designed for as well. Let our cloud experts handle this portion of it. If you're enrolling machines in Unitrends DRaaS, we're going to start by understanding the recovery point, recovery time objectives, our requirements as a vendor. We have options for seeding that data to the Unitrends cloud, and then once we are getting those backups to be seeded, we're working through with our customers to define things like the boot order dependencies of the machines, the networking configuration, so that we can mirror what that networking looks like in your production environment, configuring firewall rules and settings, provisioning out public-facing IPs where available, as well as you, the users, defining the application-level scripts that we will execute as a part of our regular testing process. We continue to test to validate recovery, and we're so confident in our process, our SLAs are money-backed. There are 3 levels of our cloud service: premium, elite, and standard, and they are based on the RTO SLA. And again, this is contractually guaranteed. There's fiscal penalty to us, recourse for our customers if we were ever unable to meet an SLA. And we never have. In our 6+ years of performing this service, we have never missed an SLA. The longest it's taken us to boot was 18 minutes. It was a multi-tiered ERP application for one of our customers down in Florida. But the premium level of the service is tagged with a 1-hour RTO SLA, weekly recovery assurance testing, a robust machine on reserve for you, 24 CPU, 128 gigs of RAM on reserve for you in the Unitrends cloud stack, really defined as that at best or that highest level of service designed for those mission-critical machines. Elite DRaaS is that best value, the middle tier of the service, monthly recovery testing, a 24-hour guaranteed SLA, designed for those more important machines, but maybe not quite that critical with the 1-hour component. And then our standard DRaaS is a best effort RTO SLA, really designed for a full data center or a larger set of VMs, You can license any of these on a per instance or a per machine basis. You can also license standard DRaaS against the entire replicated volume in those same 500 gigabyte increments in which you're licensing Unitrends cloud capacity. So that DR as a service would look something like this. Your users are connected to the local site, leveraging workloads there, and disaster strikes. You're making a phone call in this case. You've already seeded the data. We've tested it. We've worked through with you, so we've fully understand and mapped through what we need to do in response to this incident. We are going to initiate and bring the DR site live up in our cloud stack, and then we'll provide you with an IPsec VPN tunnel to reroute that user traffic to the DR site. We'll run those workloads out of our cloud for you while the local site is unavailable. We're continuing to take backups during this time as well, so we're able to keep that data up to date when it comes time to fail back. When you are ready to rebuild that local site, we're going to seed all of that data onto a new appliance and overnight that to you so that you can start to re-import the data into the environment and rebuild that local environment. Now, when you are ready to fail back, we're going to tear down the very last changes from the DR site, overnight those to you as well, so that you can import those into the appliance and restore, sync those systems up, bring them back online. Lastly, so here we are syncing the systems here, bringing them back online. You're going to reroute that user traffic back to the local site. We'll send a prep kit to you to capture changes and prepare for the next future failover event. So in a very simplified and streamlined, but that's at the core of this service here. And one of the questions that we always get is, Adam, it sounds pretty good, sounds pretty neat. Has anyone ever had to use it? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Safety Products, customer that I had mentioned, that 18-minute ERP application, was actually one of our customers that failed over successfully now twice to our cloud environment, among a number of others. But these folks are an equipment device manufacturer down in the Lakeland, Florida area. So back in 2017, after they had come over to Unitrends, they were watching as Hurricane Irma was building steam and barreling up the Atlantic. From their previous solution, they did have multiple sites, but they could never quite get the replication between the two to work. So they opted to deploy Unitrends at their primary site and then leverage our cloud with the ability to streamline and offload some of that DR infrastructure that they had been managing and that hadn't necessarily been effective for them. So about 5 days before landfall, before Hurricane Irma was scheduled to make landfall, they declared disaster and had their environment brought live in the Unitrends cloud. They rerouted their user traffic, got employees to a secondary office that they had in Georgia or safely in remote locations throughout the state. When the storm had finally passed down, we helped them gracefully fail back and resume operations at their Lakeland campus. They had also declared earlier this year with Hurricane Dorian. So you can check out our case study for these folks as well. If you want to read a little bit more about that process and how their experience worked, leveraging that DR as a service. The last piece here, and this is where I'm going to have to talk to David to see if we can start doing some demos here, is our recovery testing, because I think it shows a little bit better than I can speak to it. But we will test from your backups in a sandbox environment, fully recover them, and not only for compliancy standards. That compliance testing, hey, yeah, we turn the machine on. It's essentially screenshot verification. And for a lot of our customers, it's kind of the Schrodinger's backup issue. Hey, you brought me to the login screen. We haven't been able to log into the machine. We have no idea what's waiting for us. We've worked with customers coming over that had primarily been relying on screenshot verification, and hey, one of the last times we tried to recover, an instance wasn't intact, or all the data was corrupted, or hey, the backup ended up being no good. It was completed, but it was no good. We even had a customer log in from a backup only to find that it had been infected with ransomware. Ransomware is not going to disable the OS and the boot volumes. They need you to be able to turn that machine on so that they can demand their ransomware, their prize. So what Unitrends enables our customers to do is simulate the full recovery test. You can re-IP machines, define the boot order, test networking connections between these machines, also execute application-level scripts. You can run your own custom scripting. You can scan drives and folders for malware with our ClamAV antivirus tool, or leverage one of the 50-plus tests that we've already scripted in, things against Exchange services, run a SQL query with an expected output, run tests against Windows services, whether it's something around the Active Directory domain, IIS, so that you can make sure that you can publish and host your website, database engine, and so forth. So a lot of customization. We want to give you that full visibility into what recovery would look like. So we're running this testing for our customers in the cloud, the ones that are subscribed to our DR as a service, almost 50,000 times per year, but it's also a feature now that we've enabled locally through our data copy access job. So a really, really, I think, nice feature here. And again, this is just a screenshot from the appliance where you can drill down and understand exactly what that job is doing as it's starting up our instant recovery process, reconfiguring the machines, powering them on, going through those different boot orders. And where you see successes here, green check marks, that's great. But this test will also proactively identify issues. If a query is not producing expected output, or, hey, we don't have vMotion on this target, we're not going to be able to move the location of the VMDK off our appliance, we can't use instant recovery, it's going to identify those for you so that we can make changes or adjustments to circumvent any potential hurdles or pitfalls there might be when it comes time to recover. For a lot of our customers, it's been their favorite feature. Most vendors can take a snapshot. Not all of them are performing this level of testing on an automated basis. A lot of times there's that manual scripting for users to be able to get this level of granularity. This is something that once you set it, it's fully automated. It runs on a defined schedule, or you run it on demand. You can also use it to spin up an isolated lab environment from the backups within the test for things like patch testing, DevOps, QA, or use as configured for push-button failover. So you can sync up a number of machines if you've got machines that have certain dependencies upon each other, or end-tier applications that rely on multiple machines, group those into those jobs, have them fully tested, and then ready for failover in the event of an outage or a disaster at the local site. So at this time here, I really appreciate things. And here again is what you'd see with kind of that failure and a little error message identifying where something had gone wrong in that recovery process. But ideally, or hopefully, I've been able to demonstrate to folks how Unitrends can be that single vendor. Remember that we can provide or enable our customers with local backup and recovery, offsite restore capabilities, tools for long-term data retention management, as well as that disaster recovery as a service. There's a great deal of automation that's been built into our product, so we try to make things very streamlined. Everything that we're doing both locally and in the cloud is being certified and backed by recovery assurance. We talked about the security of the platform, the hardened Linux kernel, the threat detection algorithms, and again, for any bumps or any hurdles along the way, you have our customer support organization based right here for you in the United States, available 24/7 by 365. So I'm going to leave up here a few helpful links. Feel free to capture these or take a screenshot. They'll be available on the reporting when you get that from the actual tech team as well. But we would love to chat from you, love to have you take a test drive of our software. Even feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to kind of keep in touch, or if you have any questions. So at this point, I'd like to turn things back over to you, David. It looks like we've got a few minutes here if there's any Q&A that's come in throughout the presentation.
We do, yeah. Great presentation, Adam. We do have some questions. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Unitrends solution? And that's a multi-select question, so we'll just leave that up. First question that came in, Michael's asking, are there any options for government customers?
Michael, absolutely. There's flexibility in how you can deploy the solution, but when it comes to governments, we've worked historically with a number of state and local municipalities, cities, folks in the K-12 or the education space. Unitrends is leveraging on-premise AES 256-bit encryption, and the Unitrends cloud is also meets a number of certifications that those customers are looking for. We operate SSAE 18 certified data centers that do meet the mandates for SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, CGIS, GDPR, as well as leveraging certain retention periods and that encryption can help organizations maintain HIPAA compliance. In a lot of cases, that all-in-one story has been very attractive for government customers or where folks are maybe wearing a lot of hats. We don't all have the benefit of working at a city bank where we've got a dedicated team of server admins, networking guys, storage guys. So for a lot of government entities where they are looking for simplicity and they're looking to focus more so on projects that can drive that end user experience. That automated testing and reporting are really things that have been able to help folks out in that regard. Certainly work with a lot of governments and do have some different options available. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, excellent. Question came in. They're asking, are there any plans for FedRAMP in the future?
I'm sorry, David. Could you repeat that?
FedRAMP, the federal government.
I'm sorry, I had misheard you the first time. That one I am not sure, to be honest, off the top of my head. I would have to check, but I'd be happy to jot that down, and I can check with our product management teams. I do not know if that particular certification is one that is on the roadmap or one that they are working towards off the top of my head.
Got it. Okay. Another question: what's the pricing model for the Unitrend solution?
So there are two options here. The appliances, our recovery series appliances, are capacity based. So we have 15 models of that appliance. They scale from 2 to 120 terabytes of usable capacity. Anything that you can fit on the box, you're eligible to back up. You've got unlimited sockets, agents were available. So if you've got a number of different applications, you're deploying file agents, image agents, and so forth. No limitations and no add-ons there. It's simply we size out the appliance for the environment, your requirements for local retention, typically 3, 5, 7 years of growth, depending on the organization, and you have everything that you need out of the box. Our software is a resource-based license, so similar to other softwares in the space. We've licensed by either the physical server count or the virtual socket count. So with that virtual socket licensing, you also have unlimited agents. We're not going to nickel and dime, and in theory, you could have hundreds or thousands of VMs running on that host. So we give you all of the agents that you require. Nice.
I like that. Let's see. Another question here: where are the Unitrend cloud data centers located?
Always a good one. I'd tell you, but I'd have to kill you. No, I'm kidding. The cloud data centers, we have multiple data centers. So we operate multiple data centers here in the United States, in the Southeast, the Midwest, and on the West Coast, as well as having locations in Canada, the UK, Germany, and Australia. All of these data centers throughout these different regions, we adhere strictly to data sovereignty laws. So we're not replicating data outside of the country of origin. We do have certain controls for redundancy and security put in place. If anyone's wondering a little bit further about what those look like, the Unitrend's Cloud FAQ. So if you search our website, unitrends.com, for Cloud FAQ, it goes through a full list of the compliances, as well as security controls, access, and so forth for those data centers.
Okay, nice. And here's another question that I think is interesting. If we use Unitrend DRaaS, do all servers have to be under the same SLA? I know most companies have multiple tiers. They're tier 1 critical apps, and then there's just a lot of less critical servers. Can we have different SLAs?
Absolutely, they can. You can mix and match levels of the service, just as you said, David, to best define, hey, these are the workloads that are most mission critical. We need to bring these along quickly. Others we can wait for. DRaaS, the folks there aren't just kind of hanging out twiddling their thumbs. It's a queue-based system. So when disaster strikes, if we're receiving calls, we're prioritizing premium machines followed by elite, followed by standard. So in a lot of cases, when we talk about that best effort, it may be in line with that 24, 48-hour SLA, depending on kind of what's happening at that time. But you can absolutely mix and match the levels of service to find the right balance of feature, function, and cost for your organization.
Excellent. Well, Adam, I think that's all the time we have for our live Q&A, but really great presentation. Thank you for being on the event today.
Excellent. David, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.
For more information, visit unitrends.com. Give their solution a try, see it for yourself, and hopefully it will solve your data protection and disaster recovery challenges. Great info by Unitrends. Thank you very much. For more information, also check out the handout that's there in your audience console. All right, now it's time for our final prize giveaway. We have an Amazon $500 gift card that's going to Stu Lipkin of Georgia. Congratulations, Stu Lipkin of Georgia. And our final grand prize going to Josh Follick of Wisconsin. Congratulations, Josh Follick of Wisconsin, Stu Lipkin of Georgia, and all of the other prize winners on today's event. If you weren't a prize winner, no worries. We have a lot of upcoming events, and I'm sure there are a lot more opportunities. Before we go, I want to remind you to check out the 10 on Tech podcast. Subscribe to Actual Tech Media over on LinkedIn. Just follow our LinkedIn feed there. Click follow us, and you won't be disappointed. If you are a potential sponsor of a future event, feel free to reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I hope that you will join us next Wednesday, in fact, for our hyper-converged, composable infrastructure and integrated platforms EcoCast event on October 30th. Hope to see you there. I hope that you really enjoyed the event and learned a lot. I know that I did. Again, we appreciate all the support of the Actual Tech Media audience. Have a great day. See you next time.